to the degree that you want something is the degree you're afraid of not having.
Yeah. God, I wish I started when I was younger. I go, well, yeah, but you didn't. So shut the fuck up and let's keep going.
Right.
Like, you can't.
Nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life. Because it's not till then that it's really real.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is way worse than I thought. It's like, oh yeah, it's way, way worse than you thought.
Yeah.
But luckily, there's more to you than you think.
Daniele, my brother.
Man, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to see you again, man. And, you know, first of all, I've missed you, and I've missed our conversations, and I miss going into everything that we can go into. But there was a particular draw to have you come out and talk to me because I want to learn more about something that I'm having a difficult time doing. And this is the Taoist principle of Wu Wei, the principle of doing the most while intending to do the least, you know, because I have a real hard time with it. You know, I have every opportunity now to like just relax a little bit, to not clench my jaw and try to achieve everything through force and yang energy and just kind of allow the world to come to me. And really a lot of the magic in my life has been this nice balance of that. But nonetheless, my proclivity is to just go hard. And I'm having a hard time stopping. And I can feel the wear on myself. And I know that I need to make this transition and I need to understand it deeper. So I was driven back to the Tao Te Ching, back to some of these older principles that I know have been lighting the way and informing us all on how to do this a little better, myself included. But I haven't quite been able to grasp it. So I figured maybe we can unpack this a little bit together and we can do a little therapy for me and a little elucidation of these principles that are truly timeless. So thanks for coming.
I would love to explore the things I don't practice. So that's perfect.
That's me too. And maybe if we continue to explore these things that are hard to do.
The way I see it is we are all wired a certain way. And realistically, you can change yourself to a point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the way we are wired, the way you are wired specifically that you're discussing, but I'm very similar in that regard, is also make us special in some ways. So you don't want to get rid of it, but you want to 5%, just tweak it a little, just smooth that edge. And I do the same thing in that regard because, you know, when you read the Tao Te Ching, some of those concepts are fantastic. And you intellectually, when you start understanding them, you're like, that's genius. That's how life works. Of course, applying it when your whole history, your whole being has been shaped in a different way, easier said than done. But I think also that's where Taoism comes in a way that I dig, because it's not dogmatic. It's not about you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's the way. This is a principle.
Yeah.
Do your best with it. If you're best, in fact, what I like about, for example, the Wu Wei concept, the idea of effortless action, of getting stuff done with the least amount of effort.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the key word is least. It's not no effort.
Yep.
It's least amount of effort. And least is relative, right? It depends on the situation. It depends on your ability. It depends on a lot of things. So if it's like, if you are used to, in order to get the job done, I have to put 10 amount of energy. If you bring it down to 9, you're already winning. That's a success, you know.
Totally.
In an ideal world, if you can pull it off with a 3, that's ideal. But hey, that's a long path, and who knows? Maybe one can get there, maybe not. But if I can just take that first step, that's already a win.
I mean, I'm looking for that win. I'm
right?
trying to get a win here.
Yeah.
It's a very good point though, because no action is an action.
Mm-hmm.
A 0 is an action.
Right.
And that action will not produce a result.
No.
Like you can't just manifest something and not act in the way of what you're manifesting. Think and grow rich. You know, that's a famous title of a book. Okay, thinking is an important part, but you have to do some shit too.
100%, right? It's like, that's a good start. But it's kind of like, okay, you bought the lottery ticket. That's good. That's an important element. But we need a little more to get there,
right.
you know?
Right, totally. So tell me, and I also want to talk about one of my favorite rascal masters, Ikkyu Sojun, and the Zen tradition. So we'll cover both of those, but we might as well dive into Taoism first.
Mm-hmm.
What is this, and how did this become a religion? Because it very much seems like it's borderline more of a philosophy than it is a religion, but it's been religiousized in a way, and there's devotees to this philosophy, and there are some interesting ways in which the Tao can be viewed as a type of deity potentially.
Sure.
So I could see kind of where it is, but it's interesting that this is one of the established quote religions of the world when it's so different than most of the other religions.
It is. It's the way it works in China is that all Chinese religions are based on some kind or another of animism, right? That's sort of the general beliefs across China as being some type of shamanic animistic beliefs. And then people would start their own variation on it. So people like Confucian philosophy, so they mix traditional animism in China with Confucian philosophy. Boom, you got Confucianism as a religion. People like Taoist stuff, so they mix the animistic stuff with Taoist principle, and you got Taoism as a religion. In that regard, it's interesting because people practice it as a religion, people purely read it as a philosophy, people do some weird mix of the two or none of them. Some people don't read the philosophy, don't practice the religion, but maybe they practice some arts that have been heavily influenced by Taoism. So their practice is very Taoist, but they would never even call it Taoist. They don't even know that that's what it is. It's
right.
Like Chinese medicine is largely based on Taoist concept. So there are, I guess, many different entry points. To me, the philosophy is the core. It's like that's the origin of it all. That's what is the one that you can do without. The other ones is a little bit of a shopping cart. You decide, I like these, or no, I can do without. It's fine. And that's kind of how I approach Taoism.
Yeah. What's the history? When did it come to be? Who was Lao Tzu who wrote the Tao Te Ching?
So the history is messy, to say the least. It's more mythology than history. No, the short thing is nobody knows. The time period somewhere between 2,600 years ago and 2,400 years ago, depending who you listen to, is when Taoism and the idea of the Tao Te Ching were written down and it emerged. The ideas probably predate it in the sense that many of those are shamanic concepts, but the actual writing of the Tao Te Ching would have happened somewhere in the couple of centuries time span. Lao Tzu as a historical figure, I mean, it's one of those that's good luck separating, because basically all we have about him is mythology. Even his name is not like Lao Tzu, literally, he was kind of meant like old boy, or this like kind of this teacher figure who's also really youthful at the same time. There's a tale that I'm sure is historically accurate to a T that say that Lao Tzu's mom was pregnant for 80 years. And by the time Lao Tzu popped out, he was an old man with a beard who was born laughing. So I'm going to go on a limb and say that's probably not.
Yeah, I'd bet the downside.
Right. So everything we know about him is a myth. Like one of the few things that we kind of know, quote unquote, is that he supposedly worked in the Imperial Library, and he was some kind of master of ceremony there. And he gained a reputation for being this brilliant, wise person. And this tale that, again, 99.9% made up, but is a beautiful myth, tells that one day when he was becoming an old man, he decided, I'm done. See you guys. I'm retiring. I'm off to whatever the equivalent of Florida was for ancient Chinese people, right? To warm up my achy bones and do my thing. And he gets to the edge of town, and one of the guards at the gate is like, but I heard so much about you. You are your reputation precedes you. My friends who listen to you talk live say you're such a brilliant guy. You didn't write anything. This is such a shame. Your wisdom is going to disappear. Can you please write something? And Lao Tzu is like, no, thanks. Bye. And he's like, no, time out. Because I'm kind of the guard here, and you only go through if I let you go through. So tell you what, there's a jail right here. Here is some pen and stuff to write with. So go get to work. When you're done, you can go. Until then, hang out in jail. So it's funny because he's technically, according to the myth, is created in jail, not by somebody who's oppressing him, but by an overeager fan who wants the goods. So Lao Tzu writes for a few days, composes these 81 poems, hand them over, Gar, take a look, say, this is good stuff. You earned it. Go off to... And so why have even a kind of myth like this? It's really directly tied to the first line of the Tao Te Ching, which, depending on how you want to translate it, can be the Tao that can be explained is not the eternal Tao, or one variation or another. In other words, saying that what can be put into words is always, it's never the real thing. There's something there that's reality, and words are an approximation of it.
Mm-hmm. Which is true of anything.
100%
especially
true.
the Tao.
The deeper the topic is, the more words you're just groping in the dark, hoping to catch something. And I think that story, the myth, is exactly about this. It's like Lao Tzu understand that writing a book, whatever insight, whatever wisdom is there, is going to be trapped in a way that is going to be expressed always the same way, regardless of who's in front of you. So you can't adapt the conversation, you can modify it, you can tweak the language depending on the person you're speaking with, which ultimately is what makes real conversation happen. You're putting it in stone, it's done. And then because that's the way it's set up, it's bound to be misunderstood, it's bound to become applied dogmatically, it's bound to lose whatever it is you're trying to drive at. So he almost has to be forced into writing it down because he feels that real insight is fluid. It can never be trapped like that.
Right. So he's almost bastardizing the truth of it by putting it into words, because words are always a lie. They're always a little bit of a lie because they're only a partial truth. You know, there's a little bit of approximation, symbolism, emblemization of a concept that goes in any word, no matter what. And I think poetry is trying to get you the feeling of something using these clumsy tools we call words to try and get the way everybody's like, oh, poet, amazing words. Like, well, no, the feeling that you have and the understanding you have is what's amazing. If the words got you there, they do it hopefully as effortlessly as possible. But that's definitely a deep part of it. And it seems like also another part of the ethos was to remain nameless, faceless, empty, you know, and that's a deep part of the Tao. So writing something, putting your name on it kind of goes against part of the true spirit of it. If you're really walking the walk, you remain nameless. You don't become Lao Tzu, who wrote this book that everybody in the world knows about, you know, so he had to be compelled to do it.
Yeah.
Which at that point of compulsion, it's like, okay, this is the way the Tao is working now. Without resistance. I'm not going to make a stand here. Sure, I'll write it, you know, like whatever, and then I'll move on.
And that's where the first line is genius, because technically, if you stick by the first line, that should also be the last line of the book, right? It's like, well, you can't really talk about it because it's beyond words, so we're done.
The guard wouldn't have liked that very much.
But the point is, once you get it, that what we are playing with is not quite the real deal. Well, if we have that understanding, let's talk about it. There's another guy, the Chuan Tzu, who comes a bit after Lao Tzu in terms of Taoist writing. He's the second main Taoist writer. He has a line that's similar, but in a funny way. He says, where can I find a man who has forgotten words so that I can have a word with him? And again, it's this joking kind of thing, but he's saying, look, as long as we understand that words are limited, let's play. They're fun. Let's go with it. You know, we can pass energy to each other through words.
Right.
But let's not mistake that for reality, because it's an approximation of reality. And that's what's cool about it. Say, once we understood that, okay, now let me write a whole book on it.
Right.
But
that kind of reminds me of, you know, the two great Sufi poets that I've read is Rumi, who is like kind of like Lao Tzu in this way. And then there's Hafez, who's always a little bit more joking and a little bit more like rascally in his nature. And it seems like there's that same kind of dichotomy there.
100%, you know, even Lao Tzu tend to be more... a lot of the Tao Te Ching is written as advice to people of high quality who can then use that to help lead other people.
Yeah,
so
it's a lot about governing.
Yeah, it's an idea about how some fantastic individuals can help everybody else. Chuan Tzu has a much darker view of society. He's like, society is entirely beyond redemption. I'm just going to work with these single individuals to make their life better. That's great. But I'm not bothering trying to change society. That's entirely out of my So there's a different take between the two. And but yeah, Lao Tzu, is there anything historical about him? Maybe. I mean, some people say he wasn't even a single guy. It's maybe a mix of several writers who put together things and somebody essentially created an anthology out of it. Nobody knows.
Ultimately, we get far too lost in the person.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's helpful. I think when you look at Christianity, I think it's a shame that we don't know Jesus, the person, better, because a lot of things are made up about it and interpreted about this. But if you really saw him, he still has to take a shit. He still likes to make love to his, to his woman. He still likes to do all, the whole world would have changed based upon the man, because the man himself has been mythologized rather than Christ consciousness, which is this deep, powerful, mystical truth that Christianity created. Is they created the most extreme being of polarity they possibly could. And this is what Christ evoked, or Jesus evoked. If you follow that, and what he talks about is the most extreme polarity of all of the light and love and goodness possible, and then kind of condense that into a being. And that's what's really interesting. But because Jesus has been mythologized, it would have been nice to see the man that accessed that, and that would have been really helpful. But in this case, it doesn't matter at all, because the philosophy stands with or without the figure.
Absolutely.
Entirely.
And that applies in general to most Asian religions / philosophy. I mean, think about Buddhism. There's Buddha's life. There's not a ton of solid evidence that, probably there's some seed of truth there, but was he really the guy that the myth tells? There's no way to know. There's the first things that are written about him are 150 years after his life. By that point, you can be talking about Superman, right? Because it's mostly is going to be made up. Jesus is not 150 years, but there's still a big gap. So most of these folks, you don't know the reality. You know a myth. There is
in Buddhism, there's a saying, if you find the Buddha, kill him.
Yeah. That's a Zen thing.
Which is very much this idea, no, don't get lost in the person here. Follow the idea. And I think that's the beautiful part of both Taoism and Buddhism. It's no. We're not talking about people here. We're talking about ideas.
Exactly. In Western traditions, history is a big deal. Whether Jesus really lived and died on the cross and was resurrected, it's almost seen as that makes the religion true or not.
Right.
In Asian stuff, it doesn't really matter. Whether there was Buddha or wasn't, whether he was, it's the principles. Do the principles work or not? That's where it begins and ends. It's purely, as you said, about the ideas, not about the history behind it.
Which is a much more powerful way. Everybody should be able to follow the path. Any religion, in my mind, should be a bridge to the divine.
Yep.
And anybody should be able to follow that bridge and find the divine themselves. And if you don't meet those qualifications, to me, there's something wrong with the religion.
Right.
This isn't one person did it and this is what he said and this is infallible. It should be this is a bridge.
Yeah.
And anybody, if you follow this bridge, you'll get closer to it.
You can get to it.
And there's parts of the bridge that you can't even explain, but we'll get you as far as you can, and you'll figure out the rest.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that's where, to me, Taoism there's something special about it, because whereas most philosophies, most religions, in order to practice them, you should know them and then stick to a certain sets of beliefs, and that's what makes that philosophy. In Taoism, you could have never read the Tao Te Ching. You could have never heard any stories about it. And maybe in your life, you're applying Taoist principles like a master. Because why? Because that's the language of life. Because all the things they are talking about, they don't require a set of beliefs. They don't require you to subscribe to some historical theories. They don't require you anything other than to be able to read life, to see those principles that are in nature. So you can be
and constantly test them with reality.
Yeah.
Not test them with a word or take on faith, the article of faith, but let me test this against life.
Yep.
And see if it applies to life.
That's exactly what it is. So to me, Taoism, even the ism is off. There's the Tao, There is no ism in there. It's like you either understand those ideas and apply them or you don't. It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't.
And there's no consequence other than the consequence you'll actually feel.
Yeah.
Like this hypothetical judgment that's going to create some eternal consequence for you one way or another in another world. Okay, whatever. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah.
Does this help in this world? Does it help in your life?
Yeah.
That's where it's a lot more interesting.
And to me, beautiful because it's practical, right? Exactly what you said. There's a very pragmatic element to it. It's like, if you understand the law of gravity, you probably are not going to lift a hammer over your head and let go. Is it a sin if you do? No, you just get bumped and it sucks. It's like, that's where it begins and then. So if you learn those things, it can make your life easier. Can you swim against the current? Yes, but it's a lot easier to swim with the current. And it's just stuff that if you get, it helps make your life easier. That's it.
Let's go to this first passage, because this is where you started it and told the first part, but there's some really interesting parts because it's weaving in a subtle explanation of the Tao and then also some starting to get right into some advice as well. So I'll read this. This is the Stephen Mitchell translation. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. This is some deep poetry. So let's take this piece by piece. We talked about the first part of it. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. And we kind of talked about that as well. It's like, what is this? This is a pen that I'm holding up right now because I call it a pen and I understand what a pen does and it meets the criteria for the pen. But if you were wordless, you would just see the thing and see what it does and it wouldn't have been emblemized. But because it's a pen and that's a simple thing, it meets the criteria quite well.
Yep.
But so it becomes a particular thing rather than an expression of the ability of what it potentially can do.
I think you nail it because it's very related to something that we were talking about before we were on the podcast earlier at lunch, like how people use labels for ideas. And the reality is that those labels they lead to more misunderstandings than anything because sometimes it sounds like we're having the same conversation, we're talking about the same thing because we use the same label, but what we mean by it is completely different. Somebody will talk Christianity and they think about the Inquisition and squashing different religious viewpoints. Somebody else is talking about Christianity and they are talking about being nice to your neighbor. You're both using the same word and they have nothing to do with each other. Yeah. And so sometimes that's the problem with words is that there's a range of meaning and we get completely lose track of the practical application of it. It's like, what does your Christianity mean? How does it make you behave? Does it make you be nicer to your neighbor? I'm down. I like it. Does it make you be an intolerant freak? I'm not down. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I wanna see what the action is, the flow from whatever you're saying. And I think very often we get caught into this semantic discussion where people, they may be having an argument and they are not even talking about the same thing. And people go on for whether you're talking about politics, whether you're talking about religion, whether you're talking about so much stuff. Half of the time, I'm just like, I don't care. Show me what it means. I hear the words, I hear this and that. Show me how it translates into behavior. Show me how it translates into pragmatic things, how they affect life. Because otherwise, we're just getting lost in like some philosophical castle here that doesn't really have a parallel in real life.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he's driving at there.
As you approach, there's a great concept. I forget whose concept it is, but he talks about hyperobjects and these things that are impossibly complex to understand. And the more people who are a part of something and the more ephemeral an idea becomes and the more variations on it, the more difficult it is. Because let's go back to this pen. Well, if I stab someone in the neck with this pen is a weapon.
Yep.
And that's what this pen is. And then is it really a pen? Well, I suppose it's a pen, but really it's a pointy thing that you can poke somebody with.
Yep.
Or if I'm using it to hold my place in a book, is it a pen or is it a bookmark that just happened to be a pen? Or if I'm using it to hold something down, well, then it's a paperweight. But it's still largely understandable. But this is such a simple thing, and it can still be many things. And then you get to something like Christianity, and I think you mentioned there's approximately 30,000 different variations of Christianity that are practiced, different sects, different belief systems. And then within those 30,000, there's each individual that's approaching those same core tenets with their own purview on what it means in their own internal translation. So when you say the word Christianity, what the fuck are you talking about?
Exactly. It's like, there is no such a thing. It's like, give me the specific example. Otherwise, it's abstract. It doesn't mean anything. And I get it. It's like living in the world means having to generalize sometime, because it takes forever otherwise to get to the point of saying, no, what I really mean in this one instance, in this one time, and this one. But the problem with generalizations is that while they are useful to some degree, they are also horrendously lacking precision. And not only lacking precision, but downright distort reality sometimes and take it to a place where it really has no parallel in reality. But we treat it like it's real. And because it's a word, it feels solid. It feels like it means something. And so, and to me, that's the origin of many, 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 many problems.
Yeah.
Think about, the kind of political rivalries that exist between people and how people can get really nasty with each other over politics. Most of the time, you all want your kids to live a good life. You want them to be healthy. You want to drink water that's not poison. You have a ton of stuff in common when it comes to how you go out and live your day. Start with that. Let's focus on that part. A lot of the other things is abstract. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are real differences in behavior. Okay, let's address those. But many, many other times they are verbal traps that we fall into. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's, it makes me hesitant to use certain words. Like the word God is a word I'm very uncomfortable with.
Yep.
Even though I feel like I know God. I feel like I've felt what God is through my own journeys, and I understand and I feel God as the all sound, the all light, the all color, the everything, capital L love, capital M mystery, capital S source. Like it's the only thing. It's the thing, It's like, and in many ways it's like the Tao, although we'll go into that probably as well, because they say that the Tao is older than God, which is very interesting. It's like, it's almost like, and there's different ways to explain that, but the word God itself, I use it, and I know that everybody is hearing a different thing.
Completely. Somebody immediately is going to go like, he's a weird religious freak.
Yeah, exactly.
My dad was a Baptist preacher, was an asshole, so I hate Aubrey. And he's like, whoa. There are a few passages there in between Aubrey saying something about God the way you mean it. And, Yeah, I think that's the problem with language. That's why I think I understand what they mean there by having to adapt language. Like when you are face to face with somebody, you feel their energy, you see their reaction, you see how a word you said makes them squirm one way or another, and you can tweak it immediately. You can, it's like, oh, okay, I got that feedback. This is where you're coming from. So let me try to go about it a slightly different way. And then you can adapt it and you can make communication successful. In written words, online, you don't have any of that stuff. And so you're stuck with these verbal traps again.
That's, it almost seems like the only way to really use language well is in a one-on-one conversation. This is like what you're talking about, because there is that feedback. You have to see if the person understands what you're talking about. And I think it's also a problem that we get into when we judge what someone said a long time ago without the context of the environment, the person, the whatever. And it might illuminate some ignorance for the time, but the ignorance of that time was so pervasive that the idea that someone was supposed to be elevated beyond that ignorance is absurd.
Yeah.
and it's like, so, but we'll still punish them according to the standards of what we know now.
Yeah.
Like in 1985, like wearing blackface for Halloween was like, it was just normal.
Right. Yeah.
And it wasn't, someone didn't mean offense by it. They just didn't know better. Wearing a Native American headdress was not offensive. It wasn't taking away from a culture. It was just like, I'm celebrating this in some way or playing. But now we know better. And so now there's a different standard. But to hold somebody to something from a past time and apply it to now, it's like you have to know the context, the time, the environment, and the people, the place. And yeah, sure, it may illuminate that they didn't know something.
Sure.
But one thing that pissed me off, I came to Texas and I got tricked into going to a ski trip that was really like a Christian conversion trip, and they're like, come on, let's go skiing. And there was like Bible study every night. I was like, come on, you got to be kidding me. I was fresh out of moving from California. My parents were fully agnostic and like, well, we don't know. We don't believe in anything. And then they were explaining to me, they were like, if you don't believe in Jesus as your savior and take him into your whatever, that you go to hell. And I was like, okay. Well, from what I know, humans have been around for, 80,000 years, and Christ has been here for 2,000 years. What happened to everybody before that? Are they all in hell? And they're like, well, and the preacher or whatever, he said, well, they should have been worshiping the Christ before he came. And I was like, what?
Right.
What are you talking about? Like, how are they going to know? If they don't know, how are they going to worship Jesus before he's even arrived, before someone even expressed anything?
Right.
But they have this belief that, oh, well, you still go to hell anyways. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. Get me out of here. I don't like skiing this much.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. I'm done with this nonsense.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting, but it's the same principle of judgment that we apply when like there is ignorance, just plain ignorance. And if you're going to punish literally not being aware when you had no ability,
of course,
no agency to make a choice based upon your awareness, what game are we playing here? What demonic fucking principle is this?
And that's where, to me, in Tao Te Ching fashion, is like somebody was going that far in that direction and coming up with their whole theology about how that works that way, and the people who are, it's like, bring it back down 16 levels. How do you treat your neighbors?
Yeah.
How do you raise your kids? Tell me about that. It's like, bring it back to a place where it's here, where it's tangible, where otherwise, when they go far, people come up with really weird shit. Where it's like, how do you even, what kind of perverted abstract game are we playing here?
Right.
It's
right. Yeah. And that's where these dogmatic principles, then you try to apply it to everything. And you realize that there's irreconcilable facts of like 80,000 years of humans all went to hell because they didn't know any better, but it was their fault somehow.
Right.
Like you're either saying that this God is a demon who's punishing people who didn't deserve it, or you're like, it's just crazy, or you're wrong. But like they're not adapting that, at least that preacher at that time. I think probably there's ways and subtle nuances that so many different people have dealt with this same question, but at that point in that time, it was not dealt with. So I was like, I'm fucking out of here. This is insane.
Yeah.
All right. The next line of this: free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestation. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. So what do you take from this passage here?
This is clearly, some stuff, that's one of the things that I find fascinating about this book is that every time, it's a short book, you can read it in a couple of hours, but every time you read it, you may uncover layers that have been way over your head before.
I agree.
So I feel like a lot, like this one is like one that I'm at I think I get some of it. I think there's a part of it that I'm not getting. Like the initial part, the free from desire versus kind of being caught in desire, that one makes sense, right? It's like when you are needy, when you come from a place of need because you desire things to be a certain way, all you're going to see is your projection of your own need, right? Your all of reality is going to be based on like this, I want this, and so everything is going to be filtered through that. When you don't come from such a place, reality comes, you are a much cleaner mirror. You can reflect things how they are as opposed to how you want them to be. So that I do see as an important point. But it does sound like he's going a couple of layers deeper than that.
Right. especially as he moves into the darkness. I think that was really well said, especially the idea of like when you're in desire, you're looking at the world as the ways to fill that desire. That's your confirmation bias. That's your satiation bias. Let's just call it. Like your desire to satiate a need is now you're seeing, does this fit this thing? And so you're trying to condense reality and looking for a manifestation that will fill this thing rather than the totality of everything, which is the mystery, which fills all cups and fills all things. And so that I think it's deep, but it's potent. And then mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. And I think this is now getting into classic mystic territory. This source is called darkness, darkness within darkness. What it seems to me he's talking about is he's talking about the void, very similarly to what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, or people who talk about manifesting from the quantum reality of the void, where all things are possible. And it's just a state of superposition of all possibilities. And then something crystallizes that is then a manifestation of all of those possibilities, but it's still from the same source. It still came from the void, this pregnant, overripe pear of every possibility, waiting for you to pick something, drag it from a golden thread from all possibility into reality. But it's still from the same source. And it reminds me of, and he says, darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. There's a model, and I'm going to have this guy on the podcast, but he has a 9-dimensional model of reality and cosmology. And the first and the 9th dimension are 2 different articulations of the divine. Whereas the first is the energy, like imagine the Big Bang in explosion. It's like the energy of the yang of God. The 9th is the yin of God, which is just the all possibility, the emptiness. It's where everything and nothing are pretty much the same, but they have a slightly different hue to them. You know, it's why one is depicted as the white and one is depicted as the black. It's like, this is the energy factor of God. This is the possibility factor of God, the empty part or the everything part, the nothing or the everything. And it seems like the Tao is what he's talking about is the 9th dimensional articulation in this mystical, system of understanding of this is the all possibility. This is the substrate, which is still God, but it's the substrate that's there before that one. And I believe it's like this one choice that God makes. It's like, yes. And as soon as that happens, it's like Big Bang, planets, fucking polarity, 2nd dimension, 3rd dimension, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, like, and it's this giant om, like, yes. And then there it is. But before that, and that's why it says the Tao is older than God. Before that,
there's substratum there.
Possibility waiting for that one om of creation to come through.
Yeah, that's basically, you summed up Taoist cosmology in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of, in some of the later chapters, that's basically what it breaks down to. It's saying there's this thing that's there before all things. That's, I speak of the Tao as the mother of the gods, as before the gods, as before there are even, because, in Chinese animism, of course, they have multiple deities, not just one. And they have, the Tao as this impersonal thing. It's not a being. It does not have a personality. It does not have likes and dislikes. It's this energy that's there, from which everything else will spring. And the way they break it down in the Taoism is that there's this energy that's what you refer to as the void. It's all potential, but nothing manifested. And then you have this separation between the opposites, the yin and the yang, these two opposites. And then the interaction of between yin and yang creates what Taoism called the 10,000 things, which is basically all of reality, right? All the different manifestations of reality. And basically all of life is this dance between yin and yang. And if you want to go back to it, both of them were born from this void initially. That's how they conceive of reality.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and that's part of the cosmology as well. This first split is pure polarity. It's, light and dark.
Yep.
And I think, as I was saying, referring back to what Christianity did, they made a being and, maybe actualized a being that was from a second, like Christ is a second dimensional being, a being where there's only two things.
Yeah.
There's the light and then there's the dark.
Yep.
And but they completely miss what the darkness is,
Mm-hmm.
but because they make it all evil and stuff. And this is in the cosmology from Matthias de Stefano I'm referring to. That's more of a sixth dimensional being of delusion and trying to cloud you from seeing the truth. But it's the active and the passive. Polarity becomes a very different thing than we understand it as.
Completely.
And I think they missed that whole thing with the devil and all of this. But they did, this idea of the Christ is really, I think, the only religion that's created it, really named the second dimensional yang principle of this love and life and light.
Yeah, which is tricky because all religions understand that there is duality in life. It's inevitable. You look everywhere, you see duality. But the way, by giving it a value judgment, by making it God versus the devil, good versus evil, you're really missing the point, which is what Taoism is trying to drive at, that duality is a dance, it's not a fight. It's not a line in the sand where the forces of one side and the other clash. It's this harmonious dance that's constantly changing, where these two dancing partners have to find the rhythm and the right balance. And that's what all of Taoism is about, balance at the end of the day. It's about constantly tweaking. This really a dance, if you want to look at the metaphor, but not even that metaphorically. It's how you live, right? You're constantly adapting between these two opposite forces that are not good or bad. It's like, is masculine and feminine, is one good and one bad? No, they are energies. They're good energies. They both have their beauty in it.
Yep.
Cold and hot. Too much cold, too much hot are bad, but there's a sweet spot there where you like to experience cold, but not crazy. You like to experience heat, but not where it cooks you.
And situation.
And you like somewhere in that range between where you can live between cold and hot. You want to play all of them. They're all great. And so that to me is a healthy dualism, right? It's a healthy approach to take opposite energies and find out how you can make them work in a functional, harmonious, and happy way. Conceiving of everything as this titanic struggle between light and darkness, it's kind of a grim way to live.
Yeah. When I was on an ayahuasca journey and I had a vision of Christ in form, right? Jesus in form. And I had a vision of the devil in form. And what ayahuasca showed me is they immediately embraced, started kissing and making love.
I remember that. I remember you saying that.
Oh,
yes,
man.
I remember. I love that when you said it. I was like dying laughing, but it was also profound. So I loved it.
It was really interesting. And I think there's just, again, you say the devil and it conjures up all of these different things, and it's a hyper object of a word. I think there's a big missing explanation for what the yin principle of the initial duality is, or what the opposite of Christ actually is, not being the evil thing. Because as I said, I think that's many steps down the way that involves human beings and choice and these different other energies, which are a muddied, delusional blend of things that are way, way, way down the road. But in the pure sense of that first duality, I think understanding that in the classic way of yin and yang makes a lot more sense than all of these kind of desert religion cosmologies.
100%. That's to me, in a yang art, they describe life. That's how life is. And that balance, which is constantly shifting, so you can be dogmatic about it. But that's what the real, I use the metaphor of surfing for this stuff because it seems fitting in the sense that life is sort of that wave that's constantly changing. If one moment the balance is tilting 70% to the right and 30 left, and so you say, oh, that's the balance, so let's write it down, 70%, 30%. Well, a moment later, the energy of the wave has changed. If you do that, you fall and you end up at the bottom of the ocean. Now you have to tweak it where I'm 60-40 this way. Now I have to... And so balance is a dynamic state. It's something that you are constantly adapting based on your reading of the current situation. The problem is that's hard work because it means you have to be aware, you have to be awake, you have to pay attention, you have to be sensitive, you have to read it in real time. Dogma is so much easier because it's in every situation do A and avoid B. I mean, if you're a dumbass and you have no idea what's going on, some principles are better than others most of the time. But come on, man, there are 10,000 exceptions.
Making
to that.
love is generally better than making pain. Not always.
Right.
But like generally, as a general rule. Like,
so there are good guidelines, but delicate guidelines, right? Not fixed law written in stone. And so Taoism is very big on avoiding absolutisms. But even then, it's funny. Taoism is there are no absolutes except when there are. It's like most of the time, no. But occasionally there are a few things where there's a pretty hard line. You know, there is no, killing somebody, generally bad, but self-defense or this or that. You can make an argument.
Well, he talks about how you go into war. You go into war with great sorrow.
Right.
Like with but he doesn't say never go into war.
Exactly.
He says you go and you approach it. I forget his exact words, but you approach it like a funeral. Like you approach it like a thing of great sorrow that you have to do, and then you retire sad, no matter what. Yeah. Not victorious, but sad.
Absolutely. And so he's making an allowance, but he's also showing that that's a far from ideal scenario. And in some cases you don't have an option, but other cases, you know what I mean? There is no self-defense rape. It's like that's pretty wrong 101% of the time. Right. So occasionally, not often, but occasionally there are some absolutes, you know? Those are very rare though.
And now my mind's scrambling to think, but is there some kind of self-defense rape?
Yeah, that doesn't...
You're in a prison and there's a guard that won't let you out unless you get through his chastity.
I see.
And then you'll be like Mike Tyson and you'll fuck him till he loves you. We were talking about how Mike Tyson talks shit back in the day, and he said some dark things.
Weird lines.
He said, I'm going to fuck you till you love me.
Yeah, that was
to say that to your opponent that you're about to fight. That's heavy. That's fucking heavy.
Yeah.
But yes, you're absolutely right. Like this, you start to get into absolutes, if not near absolutes, and where you have to do so much hypothetical dancing to even make sense. But even still, you're only approximating an absolute.
Yeah.
And I want to go back because I was trying to associate Christ consciousness with a second dimensional polarity, but I don't think it works. I think it's actually probably more in line with a hybrid first dimensional reality of this is actually God energy expressing. This is something that's actually a combination of both polarities. Yeah. The allowance, turn the other cheek. Well, that's clearly yin energy, right? And like all of this softness and gentleness of when I've experienced Christ energy expressed through a medicine man or expressed through, it's so impossibly gentle. And of course, that carries the combination of both principles. So I think actually the only accurate way to express that duality is more with the yin yang symbolism, right? Like the active passive. And that actually, so I think, I want to go back and just clarify. Like, I think I've been thinking about it a little bit wrong, because I think in the Eastern way, I think that's really the only way to understand duality.
It's both. It's both at the same time. And I think Taoism puts special emphasis on the yin because they say everybody understands yang.
Yep.
Their thing is like, you don't need to be a genius to understand that strength is a powerful thing, that big, strong muscle carry you through, that effort gets a result. Most people get it because it's fairly self-evident. So Taoism is like, we're good with that. Yeah. We got it.
You got this. But clearly everybody building walls, raiding castles, doing all these things. Like we
totally got it. The other side of it, though, is the one that they argue that's not as well understood. And that's the yin aspect. And that's the power of this more subtle, delicate energy that's extremely powerful in a way, in a not overt doing stuff. It's getting stuff done in a way where it looks like you barely moved a muscle, but somehow you got the stuff done.
Yeah.
Which if you look like the tales of great martial artists are clearly an older guy cannot compete with the speed and power and hardcore energy of a younger guy. How can they do it? They can only do it through better timing. They can only do it through better getting there faster, not because they are really faster, but because they minimize the amount of motion to get to that point.
And potentially they read the Tao in a way. They
Exactly.
read the flow of energy. And then we're not talking about one of those crazy things where it's all clearly fake, where someone has a pillow
like
and they're pushing
shoot
people
the
away,
energy.
shooting
It's,
chi from their hands. But you watch I watched a clip that Tim Ferriss posted of an old judoka, probably 80, going against somebody. He's almost like, the guy's trying to throw him, but he's just dancing, barely tiptoeing. Like he'll lift, but just tiptoe and like move, and he'll try to hip throw, and he'll just glide right around the hip that's trying to toss him.
I love that you mentioned judo, because that's a perfect example, because Kano had read the Tao Te Ching, and a lot of his understanding of modifying the jiu-jitsu curriculum into judo was filtered through the lenses of Taoism. So a lot of his idea was like, I don't need to teach a big guy to beat a small guy. That's gonna happen 10 out of 10 when if an untrained big guy fights an untrained small guy, they're gonna win overwhelmingly most of the time. So how can I use it in a way that somebody who understands that more yin energy can use it to beat a greater force? And that's what a lot of judo philosophical is. So people read it and they think, oh, is this going to be this very gentle Tai Chi-like thing? Then you watch judo, you're like, man, these guys go at it hard. There's a lot of sweat and effort involved. What happened to the Wei part? And again, Wei is the least amount of effort. It's not no effort.
Right.
If you go against somebody good, there's gonna be a lot of sweat and push and pull and stuff. But the goal is to use as much yin as possible. So maybe you pull them and you manage to sweep their foot as it lands. At that point, it doesn't matter how big the guy is. If you catch the right timing, he's going down. You know. Or there's that push and you go with it and you pull them with you, put the foot and you hit the tomenage throw, and all those things that's yin.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not this the caricature of yin, like the way, the guy who shoots energy out of his palms and knock everybody down, or I'll just go with it and everything is gonna flow. It's like, no, there's still a lot of yang involved. But true mastery it's another level, it's when you can use less effort to beat the guy.
It almost seems like at a point where you have less strength, like that master 80-year-old, I don't know if he was 80, but he looked like it. 80-year-old master judoka, he had less available strength. So it's almost like his judo was even more pure.
Yeah, you have to, right?
Because he had to. And it's like when Ram Dass had his stroke and he had aphasia and he couldn't speak as eloquently, his what he expressed was, oh, now I have to be even more in my heart. And he was, by all accounts, people who've met him, and he was no less powerful at that point because he just expanded his heart energy. So he was almost even more of a mystic than when he was eloquent and he could crack some jokes. And I love that Ram Dass. I listen to his talks all the time. But there was something so powerful about even the elimination, because it really brought out that ultimate supreme spiritual power, which comes from the letting go of all of the clever words. And I think they talk about this, like the clever words are actually not that clever.
Right.
There's like it's the energy. You can get lost in the cleverness of a word and how, I said that really good, didn't I? You get kind of caught in that moment of your own poetry. Whereas if you're just being, my friend East Forest, who's named Krishna by Ram Dass, he talks about when Ram Dass said the words, that he just sat across from him for like 10 minutes and they just looked at each other in this deep trance. And he just smiles and says, just this. And like that was like the most profound thing that he's ever heard, and it was but obviously those words don't mean shit, but it was the energy, and it was that transmission of like, this is everything. Just this is everything. And maybe Ram Dass at 50 would have started talking at 2 minutes and asking, done all this, and he would have missed that magical moment that came from like just sitting there.
Yeah, that's why to me language is an interesting beast, because I love beautiful language. But to me, the most beautiful language also has a certain simplicity. Like if you cannot read that story to a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old and it doesn't click with both of them, to me, you haven't used language well. It's like it doesn't mean having to sacrifice complexity. You can convey really complex ideas in a way that people from many different walks of life and experiences can grasp. And that to me is true mastery, where it feels simple, but it's not. It's just, it feels like you're just having a chat, but it's the result of a ton of work behind it and an understanding. And now you can distill it in a way that's relaxed and spontaneous. But it doesn't come from relaxation and spontaneity. It comes from a fuckload of work early on, a lot of preparation, a lot of yang, until eventually you learn how to let go. And what's left is the good stuff.
Yeah. When I think telling a story is really beautiful for that, because, and you see it with a lot of famous kids stories. Like you'll hear Jordan Peterson talking about his understanding of all of these kids stories from, you know, Peter Pan or, you know, Pinocchio or something like that. And I was entertained by those stories as a kid, and I got a fraction of it and mostly enjoyed the story. Yeah. But really looking at it from the lens of a philosopher and a lens of someone who understands mythology and the mythos that it's expressing, you're like, whoa, that was fucking deep.
Yep.
You know,
there are layers.
There are layers and layers, and that's the beautiful part about a story is it's just ready. You know, the master appears when the student is ready. You know, the teaching appears. So it's the same with the Tao Te Ching. Like
exactly what I was about to say.
I read this at 25 and I was like, yeah, cool, good advice. Yep. You know, but now I'm reading it again and it's like, whoa.
Little deeper, yeah, absolutely. I do with the Tao Te Ching. There's a one of the first collection of Zen stories I ever read was called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. And it's these 101 Zen tales. First time I read it, there were 2 that I thought were genius. 3 or 4 that I was like, I kind of get it. It seems good, but I don't know. And 90, whatever many left that I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. I think now I'm about 30, where I'm like, some I really love, some I really get, and then 70 or so, I have no idea what the hell they are doing. And each time there's like, oh, now there's one more. This one clicked.
Right.
These now make perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
But it's a process.
I want to check that book out for sure. All right, let's move on to passage 4. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. It is hidden but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God. So we talked about this already a little bit.
That's such beautiful poetry.
That really is.
Even before you go into the meaning, just like, it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is really expressing, this was the passage that I was referencing, but this is really it. This is what we're talking about is the substance, it's the substrate before God was even God.
Yep.
You know, it's just the possibility of God was the Tao, you know, and God was, and then call God the yes, the Om, right? Yep. But it was like the Tao was there first.
It's the energy. Yes.
Yeah. Man, that's good. It gives me chills thinking about that. But I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God. Yeah, like where did that come from? Why? Like, oh, it is in that way. Like, what? It's just always and then that's the thing. You get wrapped in. Oh, it was infinitely there. Fuck.
And that's what I love, the honesty, right? The honesty is beautiful. Like, I don't know, get more to it. It's like, you're taking me so far back that it's out of my pay grade.
Yeah, like what gives birth to the infinite?
Yeah. It's like,
I don't know. The infinite just is.
Yeah.
But we can't conceive of that. We can't conceive of anything outside the confines of time.
Like, your ski trip preacher will like be bending over backward, trying to find a way to explain it. And totally. Like, oh, it's like, I don't know. There's something that's predates human experience by so much that
predates divine experience.
Yeah, predates everything. What's the starting point of the starting point, right? It's like it's too much. It's beyond, more than we can handle, and
that's good. Yeah, makes me excited.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. 22. If you want to become whole, let yourself be partial. If you want to become straight, let yourself be crooked. If you want to become full, let yourself be empty. If you want to be reborn, let yourself die. If you want to be given everything, give everything up. The master, by residing in the Tao, sets an example for all beings. Because he doesn't display himself, people can see his light. Because he has nothing to prove, people can trust his words. Because he doesn't know who he is, people recognize themselves in him. Because he has no goal in mind, everything he does succeeds.
Wu-Wei 101,
Yeah,
right? That's where it's
it.
at.
Mm-hmm. There's also a piece on judgment here too, because like a lot of times we will put the value proposition, whole, straight, full, reborn, everything, having everything. These are the things we want.
Yeah.
Everything that's the opposite of that is bad.
Right.
Right. But when you have when you're locked in judgment, there's some part of you that's locked in fear, some part of you that's held back. And to recognize the totality of yourself, right, you have to recognize the crookedness in your straightness. You have to recognize your partiality and your wholeness. You have to recognize all of this and then not judge it, because then it even puts it farther crystallized away from you, and you're almost damning an aspect of yourself, which is going to just hinder you on the path to actually getting where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, think like anything you want to learn is going to involve a lot of mistakes. If you have a judgment that you don't allow yourself to make mistakes, guess what? You're not going to learn. That's just how it is. It's like you cannot be great at something before you ever try it. It's like, you're going to fuck up. And you're going to fuck up again and again and again. And the more you judge yourself and you're holding and going like, I shouldn't fuck up, the more it's going to take you. It's kind of like that Zen parable about like, I really want to learn this. How long is it going to take? 10 years. But what if I train twice as hard? Well, then 30 years. And it's like, what do you mean? I'm putting more energy. It's like, yeah, that's the problem. You're putting too much in it. You know, it's like, let it has its own course. Take it. It has a flow. Go with that. The moment you reject that process, then you're bound to make that mistake a lot more, because you don't learn from it, you don't go through it, you're holding back, you're judging yourself, and you just don't allow yourself.
And you start to make
chance.
because our judge, so when we judge ourselves, we withhold love from ourselves, and we withhold love from the world that might be trying to reach us because we feel that we don't deserve it. And that act of withholding that love from ourselves then causes us to, it's so painful. That's the most painful thing, is the withholding of love. Love is the most beautiful force to feel in the universe. And then the withholding of it is hell. Yeah. So of course we're afraid of hell. It's like a child who's afraid of getting grounded. What do? You lie. You lie if you're afraid of getting grounded. If you have a, really authoritarian parent figure and they're punishing you for this, like, I don't know if I'll tell who, but someone very close to me, their parent grounded them for a year because she was listening to a hip hop album when she was in high school. Jesus. A year, right? So what did she do? Did she stop listening to hip hop?
No, of course not.
No, she just fucking lied better.
Of course.
Lied better. And that's all it is. But we do that with ourselves. Yeah. So when we punish ourselves by withholding love for this thing that we have, I sense this part of me that was turned on by this thing, or that did, or was selfish in this way, and we punish ourselves, then we just don't look at it. We'll lie to ourselves and say, no, I didn't do that. There's the justifications why, and this why it made sense. And so we start to trick ourselves, and then we prevent ourselves from actually being virtuous by embracing our lack of virtue.
It's the problem with repression, why it never works, right? Because if your way to solve something is by repressing a part of yourself, you're just empowering it and letting it grow in the darkness. And the more you try to squash it, the more it's going to come out in a really unhealthy way. That's why when you see a lot of philosophers, not everybody who's like hardcore celibate has issues, but many people are, because it doesn't come natural to them. It's an effort of the will where they are like, I need to squash my sexuality because it doesn't fit with my idea of what a good person is. And guess what? That's where suddenly you get like the Ted Haggard of the world, busted doing math with a gay hooker kind of thing. It's like, couldn't it have been just a little easier about masturbation and stuff? It's like, maybe you didn't have to go that far. It's like,
for sure.
It's like, just, you are a little more accepting of yourself, and you didn't have to turn into this weird hidden monster that you're hiding from everyone, but you can't really stop because it's part of you. And there's more honesty in it toward yourself, toward others. There's more chances to learn and grow from stuff rather than pretending. Pretending is not there, rarely solves problems. It's like denial is not the greatest strategy ever, usually. So it's...
So this is drawing me to an interlude where we can talk about Ikkyu Sojun.
Yeah.
Because this is, and we'll go back to reading these different passages. Because here's something that when I went to Thailand, there was, the monks in their saffron, I think was the color of their robes. And I was with my partner, Caitlin, at the time, and I could interact with them and like hand them money and touch them, but she couldn't.
Of course.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like what? Okay, I guess.
Yeah.
And this was because of their chastity. But it seemed to me, how brittle is your chastity that, my partner can't pay you $5.
Yes,
like how brittle is it? It's like it's like an alcoholic that can't see a beer across the room without freaking out and running over to it and drinking it. Yeah. Well, all right, maybe if you're that if you're that hungry for that drink, like, okay, I get it. But it just seems like it's reinforcing this brittleness of this concept. And if the concept is inherently universally that brittle, maybe it's the wrong fucking concept.
There's speaking of Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, there's a perfect story for this one, right? It's tailor-made. It's the story of these two monks who are in an order that discourage monks from interacting with women, right? So they have that standpoint. So they are approaching, has been raining heavy, so the road is completely muddy. And they see a young woman who's trying to cross, but there's mud everywhere. She's like in her pretty clothing, so she's trying to figure out how to cross. And one of the monks go and ask her, hey, do you want to hop on my back and I'll carry you across and that way you don't have to. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. So he does it, right? They go. And monk number 2 is just pissed and he's just stewing for hours over this. And like hours later, he goes back to monk number 1 and he's like, how could you? You know better than that. We're not to interact with women, particularly young and pretty like that one. What the hell did you do? And monk number 1 is like, I left that lady by the roadside. Are you still carrying her with you? Which is fantastic, right? It's like, why? I could do that and leave her. And that's where it began and ended. There's it's in your damn mind that you're so clingy to this idea and you're obsessing about it. And again, the more you're whipping yourself about it, the more you'll cling to it.
Yeah.
And I'm with you completely on that. If you cannot handle the fires of reality around you, it's an admission of defeat before you even get. It's like if you say that I cannot look at any woman, otherwise I'm just gonna be immediately thinking about her naked and wanting to have sex with her, and that's terrible because in my, it's like, okay, you've already lost that game. It's like, And we do that a lot. I mean, as a society, as humanity, we look at how people approach the topic of sex, not only with adults or with themselves, but if a kid is anywhere in the neighborhood, everybody shuts up or they have to use euphemism, or it's like, it's a kid, he's not an idiot. You can talk.
Oh, and he has a phone? Guess what? He's on Pornhub.
Exactly. And it's
he's seen shit you've never even seen.
Right? So it's like, can we just do that? Have a conversation for why sex is cool and fun, but also comes with some issues. So you probably want to be a little more emotionally mature before you think to dive about it. And have that conversation in an honest way. What the hell is so hard about it?
I know. It's very interesting. And that's a very complex topic that I think we could dive into. Maybe we will. But I want to go back to this idea. And I think the crazy madman, Carlos Castaneda, who followed some Toltec philosophy, he said this really well. He said, basically, renunciation is a trap because you think you were doing great things, but really you're just focused on yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I've fasted for so long. Congratulations. What'd you do for the world?
It's like, exactly.
What did you, how is that good for people?
Yeah.
All right, maybe if there was not enough food and you fasted to give somebody more food, great, good for you. That's very kind. The people in Auschwitz who had very few rations of stale bread and Viktor Frankl saw them tear off a loaf and half of their serving and give it to somebody else. Okay. All right, now we're fucking talking.
That's powerful.
Now we're talking,
Yeah,
but when you're just renouncing, it's in this almost masturbatory self-aggrandizement, kind of concept of so there's a lot of traps in this path. And it's not that, every path is valid. If you're really genuinely called to it, go for it. Like, live your life exactly how you want. And if this is the way that brings the best out of your life, like, I'm not judging the path. I'm just saying it's rife with challenges and traps that I think are sometimes overlooked, and I think probably fewer people than most are not aware of these traps that they're falling into.
And that's where I think the absolutism comes in, where we're not making an absolute argument like, oh, celibacy is always bad, or everybody who depends on the reaction, depends on the result it creates. If it allows you to free up some energy and be a more loving human being and you're happier with yourself, then it clearly was the right answer.
Right.
If it makes you that you cannot take $5 from the lady because otherwise, then I think the results are speaking loud and saying that that's not working out great.
Yeah, totally.
Depends.
So let's talk about Zen Buddhist monk, Ikkyu Sojun. I'm wearing him on my shirt, and if people can see, he's drinking wine off a woman's beautiful breasts.
Yes.
And this was a shirt that you made, so this was a deep understanding of this guy, and he was a very interesting character for history. So tell us some stories about this man.
He's my all-time hero. When people ask me one historical figure that stand above and beyond for you, I'm like, Ikkyu Sojun, no hesitation. He's my guy. I was introduced to Ikkyu by the writer Tom Robbins, guy, Still Life with Woodpecker, Another Outside Attraction, that guy, right? I love Tom Robbins. I find him a phenomenal writer, and I love Zen. So when he told me about this guy, I'm like, how do I not know about him? I need to dive in. So I started reading. And Ikkyu is like Bugs Bunny in a Zen kind of way. He's hilarious, he's a trickster, he's funny, and he's also really profound at the same time. Yeah. His story is a trippy one. I'll try to make it quick, like a quick bio of him. He lived in I think he was born at the very end of the 1300s, going into the 1400s. He was the illegitimate son of the Emperor of Japan. Right when he was born, there were like palace conspiracies kind of thing. His mom was afraid that somebody may try to kill him to get rid of a possible claimant to the throne. So she put him when he was 5 years old in a Zen monastery, kind of to say, look, he's going to be a Zen monk. You guys don't have to worry about it, because jealousy among concubines.
I mean, it was crazy. I watched this show on Netflix called Age of the Samurai.
Yeah.
They were some fucking killing, manipulating, Machiavellian. It was wild.
Yep. And that's exactly what she's afraid of. So he's like, please let him live. He's going to be a happy little Zen monk. He's going to have nothing to do with anything. So the guy grows up without his father, really without his mother, because he got to only see her once in a while. He grows up in the very stern, strict, severe thing of a Zen monastery. It's not the recipe for the perfect, joyful life right there. And Ikkyu is, as he grows up, he has this incredible grasp of Zen, and precisely because of that, he puts him at odds with so much of the Zen establishment, because the way Ikkyu described it, so much of the Zen establishment become largely corrupt, largely more worried about money and donations for patrons than for the essence of it all. So to a point where he's regularly clashing even with some of his own teachers. Like there's a point where in Zen there's this really weird thing where a quote-unquote enlightened master, however you want to define that, has to sign a certificate of enlightenment to prove that you're enlightened, that you made it, that you achieved it. That's like your spiritual PhD, and if you get it, clap, 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 now you can go teach and be... And Ikkyu got his certificate, and he was like, he burned it. And he's like, how can you that's the thing that opened... I'm like, certificate of enlightenment, seriously, that's what we're doing here. It's like, fuck you guys. It's like, let's be real. So at one point they are trying to rope him in, and they give him, they make him the head of this one smaller monastery, saying, maybe the responsibilities, because he was a bit of a wild guy, but he was also brilliant. So they're like, at one point nobody can find him a few days later, and he's like, where the hell did he go? And they go to his quarters and they find this poem that he left behind, where basically he's saying, look, 9 days in this monastery, I'm losing my mind by now. If anybody come looking for me, I'm either at the brothel or at the sake shop. See you guys. It's like, well, what? You're supposed to be the spiritual master. And so much of his thing is aiming at one issue, which is the artificial separation between sacred and profane. He's saying there is no such thing. if you cannot find the sacred in the most mundane circumstances in life, you're not going to find it meditating on a mountain away from everything and everybody. The sacred is a state of consciousness. The sacred is how you approach things. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. So if you cannot, and so in that sense, he has this very, he digs sex, he did drinking, he digs Zen, to him, there's no separation between those things. It's like, if you do it in a certain way, anything can be sacred.
Yeah.
And vice versa, if you do it in another way, the most stereotypically sacred activity is bullshit, is an ego trip and has nothing to do with. So you can be meditating there in your robes and stuff, and it's all an act. There's nothing spiritual about it.
Yeah, it's like the husk without the corn. You know,
exactly.
It's like it's just missing the essence of what this is really all about.
Yep.
And that's, I think, something we do in so many different religions. Like that is such an important concept of like find the sacred in everything, you know, and whether that's a mystical teacher I follow, Paul Selig, is like, unless you can find God in the mud and in the shit, you don't know God.
That's exactly the same concept.
You just don't know. And unless you can find Zen in sex and Zen in sake and Zen in, you know, like
exactly.
whatever, you don't know Zen either. You don't know how to savor every moment and treat every moment as if that is the essence of Zen. That's what they're talking about. Like, it is the ultimate just this. It's like, oh, you're pouring tea, just this.
Right.
It's like doing one thing at a time and relishing it.
Yep.
Presence, knowing that presence is the magical beauty that we're all craving. It's the ecstasy of it. People think, oh yeah, there's that new relationship energy when you meet someone. Well, what is that? You're just present. You're just present because your desire is driving you to presence.
Yep. And
the newness and the novelty is driving you to presence, which is creating awe and creating all of these feelings. That's the big difference, you know? That's why something new is powerful, because for a moment we stop all of the fucking other stuff we're thinking about and we're like, wow. And every moment has wow possibility if you're right there with it.
Yeah, because you're looking at it with new eyes, with unfiltered eyes. You're not projecting your expectation or your past history or whatever. You're seeing this person, there's that magic. Whereas after a while, you take it for granted, you see what you want to see. And that's, to me, the essence of the game, right? Is finding that, it's funny, that too is hilarious. Like, you know, there's a classic Zen saying about kind of sleeping where you're tired and eating when you're hungry kind of thing. The full quote, it got a lot more scatological. It got in like, peace, shit, and be human, right? It gets very... And even the fact that people only quote the first stuff and skip the second tells you that they completely miss the point.
Yeah.
Because it's like, embrace the human experience. And that's a layer of consciousness in everything that you do. And that's where it's at. That's where you find the sacred. You don't find it in like mystical clouds of incense. They are a part of life. They are great, along with everything else.
Yeah.
And so Ikkyu becomes, of course, this kind of jester because he's always poking at the stuffiness and the rigid rules that are missing the point.
It's almost like the virtue of the heyoka.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
That coyote, the trickster medicine that keeps things from being too rigid and too dogmatic by just doing the opposite thing. Oh, you're supposed to circle the lodge fire this way? Okay, I'm going to go the other way. Oh, you're fasting? Let me eat this fucking... delicious fruit in front of your face and see how you handle it. Like, this is an essential quality to any spirituality to prevent it from getting stale and lifeless and dead.
And that's what he is. He's you said it perfectly. He's the Zen heyoka, right? He has that energy in a Zen context. And that's how he is throughout his life. And what I love about it is that many people who play fast and loose with the rules, very often they end up doing it in a self-serving way.
Right.
Where suddenly is like the cult leader who's having sex with everybody's wives because it's like power, and all the wealth somehow flows to me and all that stuff.
Right.
Ikkyu play fast and loose with the rules, but you never hear a story of people saying, well, he was kind of a dick about it. He's just a very free human being, but not an abusive human being, not a predatory, I'll use the lack of rules just for me and screw you kind of thing. That never shows up, which is very rare, because many cases where sometimes you see people who have brilliant ideas, you're like, oh, that's great. I like the flexibility. I like the non-dogmatic approach. Oh, and then you had to become a cult leader. Fuck.
Missed
that opportunity.
You see that time and time again.
Whereas with Ikkyu, he comes across as a genuinely kind guy, as somebody who is just a good human being to others, but he's also having a blast. He's also not bound by the same restrictions that many people are. And I love that combination. I like that, in some ways, like, the prototype of the good bad boy, right? He's enough of a bad boy because he's clashing against the rules, but he does it also in a way that's never like the downside of the stereotype of the bad boy, who's kind of a dick and selfish and all of that.
Right.
So to me, it's like, that's the perfect Tao right there, right? He's just at that edge between these two opposite energy, and he keeps them at the right balance. And he's like that throughout his life. He's shortly before he died, which, by the way, he had a really long life. He had this thing that was hilarious where he tells his disciples, after I'm gone, I know some of you guys are gonna mostly spend your time around ladies, and some of you are gonna do this, and those paths are fine by me. Those are good Zen. But if you become a professional cleric and start blabbing about Zen as the way, then you're my enemy. It's like perfect.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The truth is that if you can practice Zen while making love and having sex, that's the hardest to practice. And I'll give this example. When I was around day 4 or 5 of my darkness retreat, I was dealing with so much, stress and emotional stuff coming up and visions of all kinds of really heavy things that were happening. But then somewhere around day 5 of just being in the black, completely denied everything, and my thoughts naturally not gravitating towards anything sexual at all.
Sure.
I started thinking about sex, and I started feeling, because you're so sensitive in that point. It's just feelings. That's all you have are your feelings. And so everything that comes up is so strong. And I started feeling the feelings that come from that lust and pleasure and it was like, oh God, this is strong.
Oh yeah.
Like, whoa, this is fucking intense.
Yep.
And it's almost so intense. It's almost like being tickled. Like you can't not move around to try to escape, even though the feeling's good.
Yeah.
Like to really be there while you're being tickled and not numb the tickling with your mind not being tickled, but just be infinitely tickled.
That's rough.
Fuck, that's hard. Even though the sensation is pleasurable, nonetheless, like to really be there and not move away from it or at least numb it or dull it out a little bit. Like to practice Zen in making love, it's a fucking beautiful and powerful thing, but it's challenging to do that. It's I think almost probably easier to pour tea in the Zen way. Like it's hard because you got to have very concentration and being present, but you can do it, but like
in the middle of sweaty, grimy sex is a bit, there are two things that come to mind about that. One thing about tea ceremony that's interesting, by the way, is that it was actually one of Ikkyu's disciples who created the tea ceremony as we know it, as like this Zen ritual. Tea ceremony kind of existed as a social thing. He made it a Zen thing. So Ikkyu actually indirectly had a huge impact on Japanese cultural life, because one of his guys was the guy who started tea ceremony. Another one was influential in no theater. They played a big role in like poetry and calligraphy. So a ton of Japanese cultural arts go back to kind of the guys following him around because they dug him. And then the other thing that was coming to mind regarding what you say on the sexual stuff is like the beautiful part about that is that if you mess up, the practice is still good, right? It's like there are worse things to practice getting good at, right?
Yeah.
It's like
totally.
It's like, oh, I was not quite into the Zen of it. You know what?
Let's try again.
Fucking good anyway.
I need about 3 hours, so let's try again. For sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's a great quote that he has as well, and this quote is, "Throw me into hell, and I'll find a way to enjoy it."
If you put a gun to my head and you say, pick one quote out of all of literature that you love more than anything, that's the one. That's just, doesn't get any better than that, right? Throw me into hell and I'll find a way to enjoy it. He's not denying that some stuff sucks, right? He's not denying, because so many people, especially in spiritual circles, they try to spin it. It's like, no, look, it's a gift. It's something. No, sometimes it sucks. Sometimes
it's hell.
It's done, piss on my head and tell me it's raining kind of thing. Sometimes it's just bad, right? There's no spinning it. So he's saying, yeah, it's hell. We agree. But you know what? I'm going to find a way around. I'm going to find something, even in the shittiest situation, to make it okay for me.
Yeah.
Now, of course, some of it is a boast, because the reality is that if you apply enough pressure to a human being, there is a breaking point for everybody. So magic only goes so far. However, the reality is that some people, they can be freaked out and flipped out and mad for 3 days because somebody cut them off in traffic, and somebody can survive Auschwitz and be okay. So clearly there's a huge range in there in which you can find ways to deal with progressively more uncomfortable situation and handle them well. Again, with some limits, but those limits can be stretched dramatically.
Yeah.
And that's the goal ultimately.
It's such a message of personal sovereignty, of saying like, all right, we're not denying that what you're in sucks. And I'm not claiming that I know the way. Like there's not one rule, one application fits all. Oh, well, you're in hell, you just accept it. And then the surrender, there's always the redemption of this moment.
Yeah.
That's not what he's saying. He's like, I'll find a way to enjoy it. Like I trust myself so much that in any situation that's awful, I just believe, I have faith in myself that I'll figure out a way to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's fucking awesome.
That's powerful.
Because then you apply that to anything that you're afraid of. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm afraid of getting sick in this way, or getting cancer, or getting dementia, or getting this. But if you really believe that, like, all right, whatever hell this is, I'm afraid of this injury or this losing my money, whatever hell this is, I'm going to find a way to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you can really believe that, you're free. You're free. You're free of fear.
Yeah, that's why it's just such a beautiful concept. And it's in so few words. That's like the simplicity, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure you all have read a similar concept expressed in different ways, but it's a little clunkier. It gets very few words and capture it perfectly. And I love that about him. And he had a rough life. He grew up without parents. He grew up in this kind of stern environment. He lived through the beginning of a period that was like massive civil war in Japan that destroyed the capital where he was living, had to flee, he saw people dying of starvation in the street. He had to deal with some heavy shit in his life. It wasn't all easy. And he still had that attitude. So, it's easy when you're like, some people who are like, okay, you have been lucky from day one. I like it. It's still a good concept, but it's a little easier. The guy lived through some real shit. So he's like, he has dealt with hell. And yet he still got to say it. I'm like, okay, well, then you win. That's when you add.
Yeah, he's walked the walk to some degree.
And some of it, I have to kind of almost take back what I'm saying, because some of it, it's impossible for somebody else to judge from the outside, because you can look at somebody's life and think like, what do you ever have to complain about? You had it great from day one, but you never really know the kind of internal mountains that they had to climb.
Well, it's like Elon Musk on Joe Rogan. He said he looks very serious, and he says, you wouldn't want to be me.
Right.
Saying that to the audience, like, you wouldn't want to be me.
Yeah.
Like, I know, I'm Elon Musk. I've done all of these things. I'm so rich.
Right.
I can get divorced twice and give $1 billion each time. And it's like, no, like, that's how rich I am.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fucking matter, and people project that on me. They project that on,
sure,
you and everybody, when it's like, oh, well, yeah, it must be nice.
Yeah,
like,
it's like,
you don't know
what anybody's
and then
going
someone famous commits suicide, like Robin Williams or Heath Ledger, and they're just like, anomaly.
Yeah,
it's not. It's like it's always a subjective experience. Like nobody knows the burden that somebody else is carrying and the demons that they're having to face.
Big time. I think it's easier for people when they recognize something objective that they recognize as hell. Then they're like, oh, you earned it. But the reality is that they may have earned it and you just don't know it because you can't tell. That's all.
Yeah, because the external is typically easier to face than the internal. Of course, there's no absolutes, right? No. The internal is always easier to,
like sometimes.
No, sometimes the external is fucking
being
brutal.
tortured by ISIS is pretty bad.
Exactly. But the internal is very challenging. And the external, because we can apply practice that we have. Oh, there's this external problem. All right, let me overcome it. Let me figure this thing out. And there, in the doing of it, in the clarity of the doing, so much of the pain of the internal is the confusion and the frustration and the self-doubt and the, even if you're moving a giant pile of sand with 1 teaspoon and that's all you get to do. Well, you know you're making progress and you know what to do and you can endure it in a way because there's clarity and there's just the labor and the pain. But when you don't know what your spoon is and you don't know what the mountain is, but all you know is you're suffocating and drowning in this sand and you just need to get out. Well, it's tough.
Yeah,
and
that's why anxiety
difficult.
sucks, right? It's like from the outside looking in, he's like, the hell are you so anxious about? There's nothing there that you should be anxious about. And it's like, I know it and I can breathe.
Exactly.
That's even worse, that you whip yourself because it's like, I don't even have a reason to feel this way. And it becomes the repression and all the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
The mind is a strange place. Yes.
It's a beast. And then talking about the mind, the mind is such a strange place because it's boundaryless when you really think about it. Because as we were talking about, like we're connected to the field of others. We're reading each other and our mind is influenced both from a physiological standpoint, potentially by the mirror neuron effect, but also by the heart field that's being projected, by the energy, by the neurotransmitters that are happening. Like so many things are happening in the mind. And then in my own belief system, there's a mind that continues to exist beyond death, but it's slightly different than our current mind. And then is it all not just the one mind of God, is like Schrodinger says, the sum total of conscious minds in the universe is one.
Right.
You know, like it's like, it's so hard to grapple with. That's why, you know, there's that saying, like you can walk in fire and tame an elephant and live in ice, but mastery of the mind is better and more difficult. Yeah. You know, because it's like all of these alchemical, magical things that you can do. Yeah, impressive. But how about this thing?
Clap.
How about this thing that's right here that you're dealing with?
It's kind of like the Buddhist thing where they say, Master, I'm be able to teletransport outside of my body and I'm seeing all these deities. He's like, don't worry, meditate a little more, they're going to go away. Like, wait, what? I thought it was special.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
Like, that's not the point.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go back to the book.
Yeah.
Let's see. We're slightly random because I just made little notations. All right. The master has no mind of her own. The master has no mind of her own. She works with the mind of the people. She is good to people who are good. She is also good to people who aren't good. This is true goodness. She trusts people who are trustworthy. She also trusts people who aren't trustworthy. This is true trust. So this is something that we were talking about as well. And this is kind of getting, again, very mystical understandings, but also really practical in a way.
Let's see where do I want to approach it. I think there's a line in Nietzsche that say that if you want to be a sun, you have to shine for everybody. You don't get to choose who you shine for. It's like if you're a sun, you're a sun. You shine. You just give the heat and warmth to everybody you see. And there's something there very relatable where it's like, if you want to be a certain kind of person, you're going to try to be that person regardless of what feedback somebody else is giving you back. You want to put that out there because it makes you happy, because it's your nature, because it's who you want to be. And somebody responds well to it, that's great. Somebody's been an asshole to you, I'm not doing it for you that way. I am and I'm not. You know what I mean? It's like it's the nature that I want to express out in the world. Maybe I'm going to find a different way to try to convey what they refer to as goodness, right? Maybe I'm going to find a way that may click better with you, but I'm not going to give up on that goal. Of course, we're human, so we get frustrated, right? And it's like you want to be nice, you want to be sweet, you want to be helpful, and you get slammed in the face. And it's like, oh, that didn't feel good. Let me try another way. And you get slammed in the face again. Sometime, you find a way at the second, third attempt. Sometime by attempt number 7, you're like, I think I'm done being slammed in the face. I think the Punisher is about to come out now, And I get that. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm in a place where I'm above that. I'm not. To me,
I don't think any human can. I think what this is talking about, this is an ideal.
Yeah,
it's like it's an idea that we have to distill in the ways that we can distill it. If we take it as literal, then we're missing the point.
Yeah, you whip yourself because you'll never live up to it ultimately. It's like you can live up to it a lot, but with limits. And I think there's something powerful in there about the fact that the moment you express a certain quality to even people who may not, quote unquote, deserve it, you may actually tweak something in them that will, like, when you start trusting people who are not trustworthy and you show them love and you show them trust, there are cases, not always, but there are cases where that person will suddenly feel motivated to be worthy of that trust, to feel like, oh shit, this person is actually, they believe in me more than nobody else believed in me the way this person is. This person is actually willing to give me a try, and when I fail, give me a try again. Oh shit, maybe I should try to live up to that. It feels good. It feels really good to be trusted. That's worth a shot. That's alchemical magic, right? That's that ability to, and if you were just a judgmental little asshole, said, you messed up the one time I gave you a chance, so forget it, you're done forever. It's like, you're right, I get it. But if you have strength, if you can take the people failing in you in whatever way they failed you and still be able to bring back to, okay, let's try again, then you have a shot to help somebody's life in a dramatic fashion. Again, ultimately, you got to help yourself before you're able to help others. So you can only do it to a point. You can only open your door to people so much if they abuse it. But it's a good goal. It's a good thing to keep, like, can I open it one more time? Can we do this? Because if I can, it's worth it. It's worth a shot.
Yeah, you have to read the particular situation. I think about an employee that we had it on it, and he was an incredibly talented programmer. And but he was an alcoholic and addict of other sorts. And everybody was like, look, he's drinking at work. He's like, we got to get him out of here. He's a lost cause. And I was like, all right, maybe, but I'm going to talk to him. And I hear you, like, all of these are legit. We can't have this, and it was mentioned before, and he was still, and I was like, I'm going to go out to lunch and I'm going to talk to him just heart to heart, man to man. And at the end of that, we'll see. And I was like, I really believed in him. I was like, listen, I know what's going on and I know all of that, but I see what you're capable of, and I believe in you. Like, I know that there's something more that's waiting to emerge. And it was interesting. It was like there was resistance at first, and then there was like, oh wow, Aubrey's really serious. Like, he really believes this. He really sees my good, and he trusts me to, in a way that I haven't felt before. And in that experience, then he came back, and he wasn't perfect, but slowly he started getting better. And like, that vision that I held for him became the vision that he adopted. It's like I cleared the way in some way for that thing which was always a part of him. It was always true. What you see in somebody is always true. But it's just, are they going to actualize that? Right. But if you focus on the part of them that's negative, well, that's going to reinforce that thing. But if you focus on that, the good in them, that gives them the possibility to move forward and achieve that and become that. And then over the next, he was with us another 6 years, was huge in building our entire infrastructure and brought us not all the way to the end, but pretty damn close along on the path. And it was this beautiful story of that one moment. And there's so many instances like that where you still have to have boundaries, right? But even behind the boundary, can you see the good and and trust, even though you say, I just can't. You can't, even in a situation like that, maybe it comes to the point where, like, you just can't work here anymore, but I see you and I see the good and I know what you're capable of and I believe that. And I would always, in those instances, try to leave someone with that, even when I had to express the boundary. It wasn't like, you're employed here forever, no matter what, because I'm just going to see your good and trust you. But it is super, super powerful. And with parenting too, we talked about that as well. Like, seeing that in your kids, is so important.
And the parenting one, when the failure of that is really unexcusable, because whereas with adults, you have to deal with a ton of baggage from life that they bring. And so you can do some amazing things and maybe you can pull it off and they're the place where they are at and your message is exactly what they need at the moment and it clicks. Big transformation, you save their life. Fantastic. But there are times when somebody's carrying so much baggage that you can help, and it's limited how much you can. And sometimes you have to say, okay, that's just how much I have in me in terms of ability to give to you. But with kids, they're your kids. They don't come with a baggage. The baggage they will get is the one you pass on to them. So it's like, if you cannot create a trusting environment with kids where they trust you and you don't have to lay down the law and go hard about you don't do this, don't do that. As you were telling me before, like in the classic, before I said so, right? You were saying that's such a terrible sentence. You do it because they trust you, because they know that you have their back. They know that you're looking out for them. They know that you're not trying to squash their fun, but you're having a discussion with them about, hey, this is why I think this may be an issue for you. This is why I think this is dangerous. This is why, but let's have a conversation about it. If you convince me that you can do these things in a safe way that you're going to be happy with, I'm game. Let's talk about it. And you build an environment of trust. You never have to worry about all that bullshit. The classic teenage rebellion of like, they have to lie to you to defy your authority. There's nothing to defy. I'm not putting hard lines. I want you to be healthy and happy. Do you disagree with that? I don't think so. So, okay, let's work with that. You know?
As you said, it's all strategy from there.
Yeah.
Like you agree on the basic premises and then let's talk about the strategy.
Yeah.
And this is something the Tao talks about all the time. Like it's, when you get infatuated with your knowledge, your belief that you know something, this is a big mistake. And we might get to this passage, but if we do, we'll brush over it. But it's a big mistake when you really are sure that you know something, when you have epistemological certainty about something. You don't. No, we don't know anything, really.
Yep.
Like we have our own perspective, because we're always chained to our perspective, and our perspective is always limited.
Yep.
So we don't see anything perfectly clear, especially when it's talking about a human dynamic. So if you're not open to listening and potentially changing your mind, you're fucking lost. And so opening that up, like, all right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about all of these situations. Let's see if my interpretation is actually better, or if you have information on the ground that actually makes more sense than me, because I have this idea about what this party is going to be like, but I don't fucking know.
Exactly.
So what is it? And is that actually dangerous? Okay. Yep. Is it something that's truly dangerous? What is it going to cause? Like, there's so many nuances to it. It's just opening that conversation. And I'm really blessed. That's what my parents did.
Yeah. And that stuff creates a level of self-confidence in a kid that you cannot duplicate, because it's like the moment where a kid comes up to you and suddenly you change your mind because something they said, where you go like, you know what? I think you're right. I think you are absolutely right. I think I was going with a preconceived notion, or fuck man, I'm sorry. I messed up that one. You were right and I was off.
Yeah.
That does not diminish your authority. That makes you 10 times more trustworthy, because you're not a dogmatic little shit who's going to go like, I'm right no matter what. Right. You are a person who's treating them with respect of another person. And when they are right, they are right. And you're like, 100%. We should have done your way. Sorry, I insisted on that. I messed up.
Yeah.
And to me...
thank you for illuminating my own biases.
Exactly.
And like having that honest self-reflection, like, wow, I was really biased about that, but I was wrong.
And the kid can at that point pat themselves on the back of like, man, I'm good. Look at that. And also appreciate your honesty. The fact that, this is not somebody who's trying to squash my fun. This is somebody who's looking out for me with the best tools they have, and they are going to make mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. I look forward to that adventure myself.
Yep.
Because I like talking about parenting, but I have no kids.
Right.
So it's like, shut the fuck up, Aubrey. Like, what are you talking about parenting for? So I'm like, no, I have kids. See, and now I'm fucking qualified.
I think you're going to enjoy the adventure.
Yeah,
I think based on everything that you are, and I think it's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. The mark of a moderate man, this is it. The mark of a moderate man is freedom from his own ideas, tolerant like the sky, all-pervading like sunlight, firm like a mountain, supple like a tree in the wind. He has no destination in view and makes use of anything. Life happens to bring his way. Makes use of anything, life happens to bring his way. So the first part is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Freedom from your own ideas, because those things can get fixed. It's like they crystallize. And even from a neurotransmitter perspective and a neuron perspective, they'll crystallize in your mind, like, and they'll land. And then the more times you travel your idea, the deeper it gets and the harder it is to change your mind. But when you can be supple in your neuronal pathways, like that's in full neuroplasticity of, I'm just exploring, willing to explore all of these things, and I haven't carved these grooves of my own dogma. Ooh, then you're free. Because otherwise you slip into the same preconceived notions, the same cognitive biases.
Yeah, the openness to experience. I mean, it's so funny how in so many instances in life, the majority of people have an idea of how things should be and then try to fit reality in that preconceived idea, as opposed to saying, I have no ideas. I'm going to take experience, and whatever experience tells me, I'm going to draw my conclusions from it.
Yeah.
It's not exactly rocket science. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward, right? It's like you base conclusion on evidence. I don't make up a conclusion and then try to tailor the evidence. It's basic approach to anything, really. But somehow it's rare because people get infatuated with certain ideas, or maybe that idea worked once, or maybe twice, or maybe 3 times. And so now it's your salvation to the dangers and the uncertainty of reality. So now I'm going to apply it every time. Except you also apply it when it doesn't really work. And, but it cannot be because that's my sacred idea, so it must work. It's the reality that's wrong. So I need to either lie about the evidence or come up with an explanation why it is. But these cannot be wrong. And it's like, it's a tool. It's a great hammer. You had a nail. You had to drive something in the wall. That was great. Hammered with spaghetti, not so great. It's like different context, right? It's not saying it's bad, it's just it works in a context and not in another. And I think the openness that they are talking about that is that ability to roll with whatever life is feeding you and adapt to it. And so rather than try to filter it through this preconceived idea, you're just going with what's right in front of you.
Yeah. Ideas can very quickly become identity.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's all we are. I am Aubrey. That's an idea. Aubrey is an idea, and it's an idea that's been created by me and then reflected to me by everybody else around me. This, and everybody's trying to reinforce their idea of you anyways. And this is a big teaching from Don Miguel Ruiz. He just recently wrote a book called The Actor, and he's talking about in this book how we're all acting upon this idea, this persona that we're creating, and then we're responding to the audience, and we're tailoring our idea of ourselves to our audience. But so then within the idea of who we are, we have ideas about other things which become part of our idea. This is the person that does the thing, the pen that draws the thing, or the pen that, pokes the hole, whatever. It's an idea with a function and then with a belief system, and it's all entangled together. And then the ego attaches the part of you that says, I am not everything. I am this idea. I am this idea. And then something challenges that idea, and you're like, I'm getting attacked. Yeah. And it's very much like the body tries to defend from physical assault. The ego tries to defend from a changing of an idea because that's part of its body.
Yeah.
And we get fucking lost in this.
Why do you think most human beings crave identity so badly? Because to me, as you are saying, it seems like it's a trap more than a gift. But clearly it must hold some strong appeal because people live and die in the name of their identity, of creating an identity. They get horrendously attached to certain ideals because they help form an identity. What do you think is the draw?
So I believe that, as we come from source and come from the Tao, if you want, but the yes part of the Tao, like that in undifferentiated energy of creation, then as we birth into polarity and then we create articulation, there's a part of us that needs to resist falling right back into the all, because that's not the point. The point was to be separate. So the ego is translated as I am from the Latin, right? But really what it's saying is I am not. And what it's saying is, I am not God. I am not source. I am separate, and that's a part of us. That's a part of what we are. But we're also, just because we're part of that third dimension density, we're also a part of the divine as well. So they both need to be tempered, the ego and the soul, or the ego and consciousness, whatever. Language is very difficult, as we've described. But the function of the ego is to cling to identity. And when we're an ego-driven being, like an ego-driven entity where it hasn't been checked and it hasn't been brought in balance with the Tao, with source, with God, and the everything or the nothing, then we're out of balance. And so that's what we're seeing, okay, we get the I am not everything part.
Yeah.
And it's like we get the yang part. We get the punch and move something with force. We get that. But we don't get the yin part. Just like we get the ego part, but we don't get the soul and the consciousness part, because that's not enforced. Yeah. Everybody's trying to build up their persona, and this is what's reinforced. Everybody's trying to use force to move things. So that's what we get used to. And I think it's just a deep imbalance from a natural thing that can't be transcended because it's supposed to be there and supposed to be there in balance.
So I guess the healthiest thing would be to have a flexible identity, because maybe having no identity is unrealistic, and it's probably not the goal of the game either. But to have an identity that's flexible enough that it can take many shapes and adapt to the circumstances, as opposed to having this rigid identity that become a prison.
For sure. And wear it like someone would wear a mask.
Right.
Like, I'm going to wear this mask today. I'm going to be this person. And I know nobody's going to actually see me. And I'm just going to adopt this thing and kind of chameleon, like a dancer all the way through life. Really in this flow of flexible identity. And I think it's difficult to do. Certain things, you'll have natural proclivities and certain things will remain stable. But the more fluid you are, the more fun the game is going to be.
Yeah.
And you're not doing it as a deception. You're just allowing yourself to be whatever. And I think that's another teaching from Don Miguel, is he's not trying to be his identity. He's allowing himself, he's just being what he wants to be. Yeah. And all of his teachers, Don Leonardo, Don Ezekiel, they're being who they want to be.
Yeah.
And then they're allowing everybody else to project whatever they want and just smiling at all of the projections. Like, you're this great thing. You've got the seal of enlightenment. I can see it in you already. He's like, whatever you want to say,
sure.
Like, it's all good. I'll be whatever you want me to be, but I'm just me. And that allows him to be fluid, and he's, of all the people who truly express enlightenment that I've ever met, he's the one that to me comes across that way. And he's the least attached to his own identity. He's the most fluid.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's
it's an important ideal that I think, and it's something that if we really want the world to change, like bringing that back in balance, of saying like, yes, you are you and be whatever you want to be. And this is awesome. But also remember that you're everyone else too.
And in that regard, isn't it a trip how people seem to, like, so often there's such opposite draw, where, like, think about how people go through life, where you find something that you like, and so you love it because it makes you feel good, and now you dedicate more time to it, and more time and more time, and again, it's good, there's something fun about it, and then it becomes basically all that you are. So that I don't know if it ever happens to you, where you have maybe somebody that you know from a particular experience, and you're like, oh, that's a cool person from that experience. And then you kind of dig a little deeper and you realize that that's the only experience. That's all they are about. It's like there's your friend from a psychedelic circle. Everything about their life is about psychedelics. Your friend from martial arts, they talk about nothing but martial arts. And you're like, time out. Martial arts are fun, but Jesus Christ, man, go out a little. It's like there's something else in life, It's like, whereas why do you have to take something that's valuable and beautiful and turn it into this identity that's all that life will be filtered through? Life speaks so many more languages out there. Learn as many as you can. It's more fun that way.
Because you've gotten loved for one particular thing more than another thing.
Exactly.
That's why. So, I did this martial arts. The people in my dojo or the people in my school, they loved me more. They accepted me. I was validated for this. Okay, so I'm a martial artist and this is who I am, but it comes from a deficiency in actually feeling love for yourself no matter who you are. Same with the I'm loved in this psychedelic ceremony circle. I'm loved when I'm serving medicine, or I'm loved when I'm doing this thing. So we mold our identities to be loved. And And then we forget that we molded it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we just become it. We're like, oh, whoops. I mean, I did this. Oh yeah, I did this because I was seeking love for this. But we don't have that awareness. So all of a sudden this mask, this persona that we became becomes our person.
Yeah.
Then we're fucking in for it.
Yeah.
Then we're in for it at that point.
Okay, I guess if that's how you want to live.
Yeah, it's a prison.
Yeah.
It's a prison. And then, some people, we all just, it's just really like, I think both of us, I think one of the reasons why we're such great friends is we have such disparate love of different things in life. So we can do so many different things. Like we're going to finish this podcast and we're going to practice kendo in the gym after we're done.
I would like to point out that what started out as practice kendo quickly became translated into we're going to hit each other with sticks. And then it became, oh, by the way, you know that Aubrey is ridiculously competitive and cannot rest until he crashes you and you're crying in a corner. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be fun.
But you also heard that from people who are habitually getting crushed, projecting onto me that I actually enjoy the crushing.
Clearly is a projection. Yes, of course.
I think there's some truth to it. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's there, but that doesn't mean that there's not people I play pickleball with that pretty much all I want to do is play pickleball with them.
Right.
Like that's like, great. I want to do that. And there's people who I want to go out to dinner with and have conversations with. And there's people I want to do both, and it's great when there's a conflation of these different things, but that's all good.
Yep.
It's like not everybody has to be everything.
Absolutely. In fact, it works. But, from the point of view of somebody who is many things, there's no problem being one thing for a while.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of thinking from the point of somebody that was just one thing, is just like, it's not bad. What you're doing is not a sin, it's not wrong, it's not evil. But you may find out that there's more fun in life to be had if you expand the range a little bit.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I agree. 63, there's just one part of this that I want to bring out of this. The advice, confront the difficult while it is still easy. This is something that appears a couple times. And I think this is like, we have sayings like nip it in the bud.
Yep.
We have all of these different ways to say this, but this is, I think, the best way to say it. Like, it may not even be completely easy, but like deal with the monster before it becomes a real fucking titan. And again, it reminds me of something Jordan Peterson says, where he says, like, basically have the damn fight, have the little fight before it becomes a repression and a resentment and a big thing where you explode. That little thing that's bothering you, like, just say it right away. Like, hey, that kind of triggered me a little bit, or that made me kind of feel a different way. And you just deal with it smoothly and calmly before you spin on it and cycle about it and then think about all the other times and accumulate evidence and then create this whole like exhibit A through Z of all the times that you were slightly demeaning in your intonation at this fucking thing, and then it's become this monstrous thing and it turns into a huge fight. And then but if you just said it right away, like, hey, it's easy right now. Like I felt a little something funny. There's something going on. You feeling a certain way.
I'm a freak when it comes to that. I do that to the 10th degree. To me, it's like if I feel something 1% off, I tend to be like, nope, let's address that. I don't, doesn't feel right. Even if it's minor, as you said, it's minor right now, but a string of minor things doesn't feel so minor anymore.
Yeah.
So it's, there's, I forgot if it's Zen or Taoism. There's a story that embodies these that talk about like this Chinese emperor calling to court the most famous doctor of the era. And the guy shows up and he's like, well, thank you for the honor. I appreciate it. But to be perfectly honest, not only I'm not the best doctor in China, but I'm not even the best doctor in my family. And the emperor is like, wait, what? I hear so much about you. And he's like, well, let me explain. I have 2 siblings and everybody knows me because I show up in crisis time when somebody look like they are gonna die, and I pull off amazing last-minute remedies, and so everybody claps and think I'm great. But my older brother, he actually catches diseases when they are still small, and he fixes them when they are still small. So it's not as impressive to look at because he's like, oh, you fix a small thing. He's like, yeah, and it never got to be a big thing. So he's better than me because he's using way less energy to accomplish the same goal. And our other brother is better than both of us because somehow his patients don't get sick. It's a miracle. He doesn't look like he's doing anything. He's just using preventively. And that's exactly what this is about, right? Is that way of like, you can get the same, you can do the spectacular last minute save, which is from a romanticized standpoint is cool to look at because it's so dramatic. But if I can get the same job without all the drama, why do we need to get there? And so there's that skill is to be able to fix it before it's a problem. When it's a small problem, it's talent. Before it's a problem, it's an even greater talent.
Yeah.
Right.
It applies so well to health because we all have these little warning signs, these little things. And a lot of times we don't either have the discipline or the will to change. So maybe it's a dietary thing. Maybe we see ourselves starting to put on weight. And we know that, all right, I need to address this. There's some emotional underlying thing that's not being met. I'm trying to enlarge myself to actually feel safe or to have some reprieve from this thing that I'm feeling. Let me tackle that. Let me change my diet. Let me work in the ways that I can. But then at the point that, we celebrate the people who go from massively obese to fit. And you're like, whoa. But what about people who've just stayed fit?
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
can we
that's
not
fantastic. It's good job.
Great
because
job.
You are almost gone and you made it back. But never getting to that place is even better.
It's that thing. Psychological conditions, physical conditions. Can we address them when we get the warnings? Because there's always little warning signs. There's always feedback and communication. If we're really present and we're really listening, we're like, okay, I see this melancholy starting to set in before it's full-blown depression. Let me address this. Where's the dissatisfaction? Where's the helplessness coming from? Where have I lost hope? And let me go in, learn more, figure it out, illuminate this, and then solve the situation. That's why a doctor who can see through that, whether it's a psychiatrist or whether it's a general MD who can really holistically look and like, all right, I'm seeing some things that are going to lead to bigger problems. Let's address these now. But that's not our medical model because you don't make a lot of money on that.
Not at all.
Keep people healthy.
Yes.
And that's a big problem that we're in right now.
Yeah, that's why the Emperor of China calls you to court if you are the miracle guy, not if you are the guy who creates conditions so that you never need to go for the miracle.
Yeah.
It's one is way less spectacular. But it's way better. And so it's like, it's less flashy. And I think that's why the Tao Te Ching emphasizes the yin. Everybody gets the yang. Everybody gets that the miracle worker is fantastic. It's the stuff that you don't see, though, that's just as valuable, if not more valuable, but doesn't get recognized because it's made of little tiny adjustment rather than last minute miracle save.
Yeah. It actually, that's the next line of that same piece. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts.
Exactly.
Like little tiny pieces. Yeah. 68. The best athlete wants his opponent at his best. The best general enters the mind of his enemy. The best businessman serves the communal good. The best leader follows the will of the people. All of them embody the virtue of non-competition. Not that they don't love to compete, but they do it in the spirit of play. In this, they are like children and in harmony with the Tao. So we were just talking about competition.
I'm glad we read these before the stick whacking event. Yes.
Because ultimately, while I love competition, I love it. I thrive in it. There's some release of my mind when I can just be in there. And that's what I love Kendo so much. When you're thinking about something, you're slow and you have to really clear your mind and really just react. And you're present. There's a presence that happens in competition, presence that happens when I play basketball, presence that happens anytime there's something. But actually, when I'm way better than somebody, I lose presence.
Of course.
I'm just kind of thinking about this or that. And so, today I played basketball. It was awful. I couldn't hit a shot. I lost most of the games because the way that the teams are picked, I was a player that should win games based on me hitting shots, but we weren't. And I was letting my team down and there was a lot of stuff. Back in a long time ago, I would have been kind of devastated by that. But to me, there's kind of an excitement about, oh, all right, well, today I got my ass kicked, but now there's going to be more presence when I practice. Because I'm going to think about this and I know they're good enough that if I'm not playing well, they're going to beat me. And they're going to talk shit and they're going to be right. And I'm going to have nothing to say back because that's going to be less fun. But it's the play. It turns the finite game into the infinite game of, oh, well, now basketball just went up in the fun. Now the play is a little bit more interesting to me.
There's the excitement to it because the result is not assured. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's trippy competition because it's like I notice with Savannah, my girlfriend, because she's a professional fighter. But when we roll, it's such a strange game because realistically, I've done it longer. So while I'm not a pro fighter, I'm older and all of that, I've done it a lot longer. So she's skilled. But if I go 100%, I can probably catch her. And but she was actually the easiest person in the world to get along with because she's very flexible, mellow, relaxed. She does not want to look bad in front of me. So she does not want to lose to me. At the same time, if she crushes me, which if I don't pay 101% of attention, she will crush me because she's good, right? So if I give 95% effort, I'm dead, right? She catches me immediately and I'm done. If she does that too many times, she's going to be like, you suck. You know, and so there's a weird game where it's like, I have to give it my all, but then if I crush her too much, she's going to be in a bad mood. If I don't give it my all and she crushes me, I gotta feel not that great. And she's gonna be looking at me like, oh, Jesus. So it's the weird play where, I don't know, I grew up as an only child. So I grew up with a lot of competition was with myself, where I'm split in two different characters. I'm playing both of them. And I clearly, one is the real me and I want him to win. But if I dominate, it's not fun. So I have to make it like me number 2 is doing well enough that is scary. It's like, oh, I may lose, and then miraculously me number 1 win. It's so funny, the stuff we do in our heads.
Competing with your partner is really tricky, especially with the dynamics. You know, and I've done that when, you know, Whitney was training to box, and you know, I've boxed a little bit my whole life, and obviously I have a huge power advantage, right? But so that's out of the equation. You can't use that.
Throw hard, of course.
You know, that would be insane. And also even rolling too. You know, and she's a blue belt and I'm a white belt. And you know, I've trained enough, but I have a lot of strength. I could just, you know, power through something and get something that taps her out. You know, like one way or another, just squeeze everything until something pops. Like, granted, but you can't do that. That's insane. And then, but at the same time, like if she catches me, there's some way in which I just feel her arousal towards me dropping, just on a decline,
100%.
You know? So then, what do I do? Do I fucking, you know, pepper her and like, you know, and I'll watch myself get in these, like, it's this weird thing, and finally, it's like, it's just not fucking worth it.
No,
like the only way to do it is if you're laughing the whole time.
Yes.
Because otherwise, like, God damn, it's a minefield to navigate.
It is. It's bad if you win, and it's bad if you lose.
It's only in that one you really have to embody the Tao of like, this is play. This is fucking play. Like everybody, like, let's understand.
And I do that a lot in rolling with other people as well, where to me is like, look, we are here to have fun. We are playing, we're having fun. So if I'm crashing somebody, I'm just going to ways off, and I want them to catch me at some point. I want them to feel good about it. I want them to do something where I'm like, man, that was great. You did a fantastic job. If they crash me, ideally I can bring it up so it's not such a crash, where at least it's competitive or something. But it's like, to me, it's a dance. It's like, it's different if you're doing it for a living. If you are a pro fighter, then, well, it's a different story. If you are a pro at anything, well, then you have to give at 300% all the time. And it's only about getting better so that in competition you can give your best. But if that's not it, I mean, it's laugh and giggles at the end of the day. You know, it's like we're having fun, and if I'm crushing you, you're probably not going to want to play with me again. So it's like, maybe I should tweak it a little, where there's a bit more of a dance, a give and take, you know.
And in some ways, though, you know, some people might get demoralized, but, you know, pickleball is a sport that I've picked up because my mom was a professional tennis player, and I've had a whole background of it. And these are just good athletes, but nobody's like very few people are like, I'm pro pickleball player. You know, you don't see that often. They are around. And of course they would crush me. But ultimately, like, I have a distinct advantage, but I've become the thing where sometimes on their best day and my worst day, they'll beat me legitimately. And that to them is like, that's something
achievement.
That's fucking awesome. Yes. So I always play all out. And it's interesting to watch everybody kind of adapt. And like, some people are taking lessons. Like, one of my friends, like, I'm taking lessons, and they're like, well, what do you want to achieve? I want to beat Aubrey. Like, that is the goal of this thing. And that's what a beautiful thing to have, is to have that thing that's like, man, if I get just good enough, I might be able to take a game, take more points.
And that's where, in fact, it's different with everybody. Like, most people don't like to be crushed, but some people want you to give 101% every time and even beat them every time. It motivates, it doesn't demoralize them. They are motivated, they like it, they go for it. And in that case, by all means, let's play it. But yeah, you see that with like great jiu-jitsu guys, they tend to fall into two schools. There's the guy who you're never going to tap because he's always going to go 100% and kill you. And there's the guy who can tap you anytime they want. And they do, but then they give up an arm. And if you do it well, they let you tap them or they let you get close. And that's also another style. And they're both interesting. There's I can see something cool in both approaches.
Yeah, for sure. Ultimately, though, always remembering that it's play. When you get lost and, all of the psychology of it. And I'll watch people too. And the interesting thing is, we'll play doubles or whatever. You watch somebody and they'll make a bad shot and they'll start beating themselves up about it, And I got honestly into that a little bit today, where I was like, it was bothering me that I was missing my shot. So I started to change things, and I got worse, and and I was like, I would try to like reset and like get back to it. Because I understand that the moment you start to take it seriously, and the moment you're not just playing loose, you're going to play like shit.
Even worse. Yes.
And just reminding, like, this is play. And I've gotten a lot better at that since I've been older. I mean, before, back in the day, losing was death.
Yes.
It was death.
It's fight to the death.
Right.
And there's something fun about that too. I've had play games where I literally like blood everywhere because you die for every loose ball. You do all these crazy things, and you're like, there's a beauty to it. Probably not great long term, but there's a beauty to that as well.
It's, again, to go to the Toltec beliefs, it's controlled folly, they call it. Like, you can get lost in this game and play it like it's for real. Play it like it's so serious, because there's some fun in that. There's some joy in the stakes of being, this is so serious. But remember, it's folly, and you're in control. And at any point, you should be able to just be like, switch to giggles and hugs.
Exactly.
At that point. And that's, I think, the key thing. I think rugby exemplifies that really well. And when you talk about people, maybe not at the highest pro level, and even then, like, you play rugby and then you go drink beer with both people, and it's brutal. I mean, rugby is brutal sport.
Definitely.
But they embody that, like, oh yeah, we're here to play. We're all the same in the same field, and we respect each other. And we're going to, no matter what happens in this game, however it goes, however many tries you get, we're drinking beer.
Yeah.
At the end of this.
Play hard and then have
we're
fun.
Drinking beer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Definitely.
70. My teachings are older than the world. How can you grasp their meaning? If you want to know me, look inside your heart.
I think that captures that idea that you don't have to be a Taoist to be in touch with the Tao. Right? Whereas, like, they are older than the world. They are not about learning what's in the book. They are not about learning a doctrine. They are at the DNA of life. So if you can touch that, which you can touch through your own heart, then you can know those teachings. You don't need to know those teachings to know those teachings. They are eternal. They are everywhere. Don't learn them from the book. Learn them from becoming a great basketball player, from becoming, the Tao is in everything. And you can learn it in all of those things.
It's like, it's always a remembering in a way, because there's this infinite wisdom that we carry. And when we get to know something, and it's like, oh yeah, this is true, which is always more of a reminding than a new thing that you've adapted. It may feel new, but the Tao has been within you always, and containing all possibilities and all knowledge and all things. So it's really like remembering something that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can teach you something that there's not a seed of it in you already.
Yeah.
They can shine a spotlight on it. They can help you discover it, that it was always there. But if it's not there, nobody can give it to you. It's not something that you hand to somebody else.
Yeah. All right, 72, getting close to the end here. When they lose their sense of awe, people turn to religion. When they no longer trust themselves, they begin to depend upon authority.
I mean, you see why these guys are amazing.
Right.
It's just...
it's just pearl after pearl,
line.
just like flowing effortlessly out of this cup of wisdom, and I'm skipping through. It's not like the parts that I'm skipping aren't awesome too.
They are brilliant. But
we're trying to make it through a lot of these little snippets that I identified. But
there's a Bob Dylan quote that's perfect Taoism, and is very much this, that said, to live outside the law, you must be honest. And it's exactly this, right? It's like, to a level, rules are for people who are too dumb to live without rules. It's like, you need that structure, you need those limitations, you need the laws and the rules. If you don't have that thing inside you that allow you to navigate without even remembering, I should do this, I should do that. You do it naturally, because that's what the situation called for. When you lack that guiding principle, then you need rules. Mm-hmm. And right now I said it in a condescending way, oh, you're too dumb to. It's kind of an asshole thing to say, because ultimately, if that's what you need, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's like, maybe one day you will learn to move beyond the rules, but that's fine. That's a useful tool. But the goal of the game is to be able to have no rules, and you never have to use them, because you never have to have somebody telling you, you shouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it because your understanding of life leads to the fact that you don't have to somebody on your shoulder saying, you really shouldn't rape somebody. It's like, no, it would never even cross my fucking mind. That's just not even, it doesn't come up. But
right.
And so that is the difference between external authority that he refers to versus an internal guiding principle. And when you develop the internal guiding principle, external authority is redundant.
Yeah.
Of course, if you don't have it yet, then you need some guidelines to keep you from screwing up too badly.
Mm-hmm. We see this out in the world now, where the governments are acting like the parent who's like, because I said so.
Yeah.
It's like basically treating every sovereign human as such an idiot that we need more and more rules and more regulations and more external authority and more use of force to prevent people from doing the right thing, which actually does the opposite. It actually, it's counterproductive, but they're not thinking that way. Oh, we're doing something good. We're preventing this thing. But they're not. They're taking away, they're robbing people of the choice to actually do the right thing and be moral and really trusting somebody to do that. I run a company called Black Swan Yoga, and we have a full-on donation model for all our yoga. People can donate whatever they want. And we suggest $10. Like that's, for people who want a guideline of what we suggest. Some people pay nothing or $1. Some people pay 20.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best yoga businesses of all of the other ones. And there's this principle, and I just had a meeting with the team, but there's this principle of trust where it's like, no, we trust you. We trust that we're giving you something awesome, and you're going to feel that sense of reciprocity and you're going to give it back, and it's going to work. We did that with Onnit, with our return policy.
Yeah.
We said, if you buy something and you don't like it, you don't need to send anything back, clip out some fucking coupons, do all this other stuff. Just tell us you don't like it. We'll refund your money. We'll charge it right back on the card. That's all you need to do. And everybody's like, well, what about the person who's going to buy something, really like it, and then they're going to get their money back? Our return rate was lower than anyone in the industry. And it was the most lenient policy there was. And sure, a couple people took advantage of it, but ultimately people were like, oh, wow, Onnit trusts us. Or, oh, wow, Black Swan trusts us. Like, I love them more for it. And it's working in pragmatic ways in reality with mass numbers of people.
Yep.
And it would work if the governments would really trust people too, and then inform them and teach them. Yeah. And of course, there may be laws at the end if someone's clearly doing fraud.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll stop them from doing clear fraud. Or if someone's clearly hurting somebody else, you can stop them. And it's not absolute, but the more trust that you can give, same with our, Black Swan teachers. One of the reasons why the product is so good is we trust our teachers. We don't say you have to go and do every different posture. This is the preset thing. Yep. Read the room. See who's there. Get feedback real time. Create your thing. Play the music you want to play because you know your practice. You know what makes sense. If you want to play fucking hip hop, the whole class, do that. Like whatever. If you want to go straight kirtan the whole class, like do that. You know, this is a sweaty yoga class, so ultimately people want to sweat. So make sure that that's a part of it. But play within the bounds. Color with any color you want, and just make sure you abide by these basic principles. And teachers love it. The classes are massive. We'll get 75 people in a class where the next best in Austin is like 30 maximum. And then they get 30 and they're like, holy shit. Well, why? It's just based on trust. It's trust every way through. We trust the teachers trust the people that they're going to pay because they get paid based upon the students that pay the thing. They get a percentage of that. So it's just trust all the way around, and it fucking works. It works, and it would work at scale too. Like people aren't horrendous, Hume-like idiots, where they're like all nasty, brutish, and short with each other, like the natural human nature. And like he said about life, he wasn't saying that about people, but it's this idea that people are bastards. And like you have to control them, otherwise their bastard tendencies will just run rampant.
Yeah.
Not really.
Well, that's when speaking about Taoism and the pragmatic impact of all this stuff, that's Taoism right there. Right? It's like many people involved with Black Swan Yoga, they may have never heard of Taoism, but they are practicing and they are experiencing it and they are responding to it because it's a principle that it's exactly what we're talking about. And and I love when you see it working. Like I find it moving when I see it working, where you are kind of giving something on trust and people reciprocate. It's like one of the most beautiful things you can ever witness is...
it gives you faith in the world in a way, and it's like, it opens the possibility of like, oh, people are awesome.
Granted, I cry at everything, right? I can watch a Steven Seagal movie and find it movie and cry. So I literally cry at, like, if you drop a coin, I'll cry, right? But that stuff... oh man, I never resist. Like when I see things that I find where somebody does something beautiful and somebody responds to it and it works out, I always find it like the most moving thing in the world.
Absolutely.
Where I'm just like, there is some goodness there. There is a beauty there. There is, that feels so good.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I pray that more people, and more of these structures and organizations can kind of really open themselves to the Tao, to this understanding of the laws that are older than laws. And the law of reciprocity is one of those laws. This is what Don Howard, my spiritual mentor, would teach me. Like the law of reciprocity it's within the Tao. It's contained within this natural sense of you give something, there's going to be a natural response.
Right.
And someone might, intentionally subvert that, or they might be off from it, but it's still going to draw them. It's still pulling, it's still acting on them. And so their own guilt will then create their own reciprocity to the self. It'll create all of these. If you deny it, it's going to just compound in weird, strange, repressed ways that are going to come back the other way. And it's really just trusting, like, oh, reciprocity is a law that's older than laws. And let's trust that.
I love that. That stuff is beautiful.
Yeah, man. It's really important. And I think we've really seen how the zeitgeist is moving in a different direction, and then how there's this huge response. And just like, no, fuck you guys, and this is now creating this massive conflict, but hopefully the conflict resolves itself in just like some deeper understanding.
Yeah, even when you think about like what's been happening lately with COVID, a bunch of people working from home, realizing that they could get the work done from home for many jobs, not all of them. And to me, if you are the boss at a place, in most scenarios, it's like, look, you wanna go to the beach and hang out with your kids all day? I need this done by the end of the week. When you do it, I don't give a fuck. It's like, go to the beach, hang out with your kids all day. You stay up till 3 a.m. to make up for that later, and you get it done by the end of the week. Great. You don't want to come in the office that much. You want to work from home and you still get stuff done. Great. Good for you. If you don't get stuff done great, then we need a conversation. It's like, because at the end of the day, that's what counts. But what makes you happier? What would feel better about doing your job? Or do you need more time off? Do you want to spend more time with your family? You can take all the time you want as long as the stuff that I need you to do gets done. That's it. Then if somebody does that to you, you want to give them your best,
Yeah,
man.
exactly.
It's like if you are at work 8 hours a day and really 6 hours you're watching Facebook and like, I guess I have to put in the time or they don't catch me. Now I'm like, oh man, I want to give you my best because you're helping me. You want to be cool to me. I want to be cool back.
And it's interesting is, that was our vacation policy as well, was, take as much vacation time as you want. You have a job to do. You need to do the job. And if you're not doing the job, there's an issue with how much you believe in the mission and how much you actually believe in what we're doing and how much you care about all of us in this organization. And then there's a fundamental misalignment that we need to expose anyways. Yeah. So like if you want to take, 7 months out of the year and fuck off, well, there's a fundamental misalignment that will be revealed. But this allows this, like, instead of the hidden misalignments that are masked in compliance with some policy, it's like, no, whatever you want. Like make sure your team's okay, make sure your work's getting done, but take whatever you need. And that's also this, again, it's just trusting this thing. And then that caused people to love this company. It's like, oh, fuck, I love it here. They're trusting me. They're practicing what they preach. And this is something special.
In fact, Taoist, in some way, the Tao Te Ching is written as a manual for leaders to some degree.
For sure.
It is given to people in position of leadership for how they can help out other people and run something in a better way. And whether you're talking about a business, a family, or anything else, it's right there.
Yeah. 74. If you realize that all things change, there is nothing that you will try to hold on to. If you aren't afraid of dying, there is nothing you can't achieve. Trying to control the fortune, trying to control the future is like trying to take the master carpenter's place. When you handle the master carpenter's tools, chances are that you'll cut your hand.
So let's keep to 75 because I'm not too good at this. Man, that's a one that I struggle with. I'm such a control freak, it's not even funny. So while I understand that is right, it really flies against every fiber of my being in so many ways.
It's getting to this very strange thing. And Joe Dispenza talks about, especially the last part, I think obviously there's some self-evident parts. If you aren't afraid of dying, there's nothing you can't achieve.
Sure.
Obviously that fear of death any fear is a limitation on your ability to move forward. When you realize that all things change, there's nothing that you will try to hold on to. This is a lesson about attachment, right? Like time is undefeated. It will rip everything from your grasp that you hold on to. It's not possible to be unattached to anything, but it's that recognition is like, okay, everything is flowing, everything is moving. Let's cling to nothing. So let's just be here presently. Yeah. And it goes again to more into Zen, like let's be here in the present, be here now, as Ram Dass said. And because everything's changing anyway. So what we have now is it. And that's the victory is in the moment, not in some future moment, because the future moment is just another moment. And that can either be a victory or not. Doesn't matter what happens. Like the external doesn't create the success.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I've written some great stuff on the topic. Practicing them though is a different.
It's hard.
It's a hard one.
Me too, man. I mean, I think one of the great fears that I realized was that some part of me was holding myself back from loving life to the most because I knew I had to let it go. Of course. And it's much easier to let something go if it's not that awesome. Yep. So if I didn't love life that much, I found this out in the darkness. If I don't love life that much, well, when I die and have to let it go, or my mom dies or something like that,
big of a deal.
Not that big a deal. So what? But if I really recognize how much I love my mom, then I really have to I really acknowledge that. Then I have to really deal with that attachment that I have. So it's not that I grasp this either, but the concepts are clear. Yeah. Where the concepts get really, I think, particularly interesting is the second part of this. Trying to control the future is like trying to take the master carpenter's place. When you handle the master carpenter's tools, chances are that you'll cut your hand. Because this is complicated. Yeah. Because, and Joe Dispenza talks about this, is the balance between intention and surrender. It's like you kind of need to try to control the future. Like this is him, I think Lao Tzu being such a purist, like such a purist in the Tao, like just allowing things to be, but almost because of the way the words are, and I bet if in the conversation, the words might be different, but like ultimately there has to be, not has to be, but there's likely some intention, you know, because he's talking about lots of things that require intentions, right?
For sure.
So there's intention, but then there's surrender.
Yep.
It's the yin and the yang.
Yep.
Here's my intention, here's my surrender. And they're locked in this beautiful dance. And where you are is somewhere on that boundary line in between your intention of trying to control trying to create the future and pulling the future that you want to you.
Right.
And then letting go and letting the future be what it is intended to be.
Yeah. Which is, I think your read on it is the correct one, because it's like it would be easy to apply dogmatically and say no attachment or no plan in anything. And it's like, that's not really what he's saying. It's not that one-sided. As is exactly where you're going with it, which is like as little, it's kind of like Wu Wei, right? It's not non-action, it's as little action as necessary to get the job done. Is attachment inevitable and even desirable to some degree to enjoy life, but clearly more than a certain amount is just going to make you miserable.
Yeah.
Planning, good. Effort, good. But expecting that everything is going to work according to plan and that you can control it all, yeah, good luck with that. Have fun. It's not going to happen.
No,
and
that's not the way of it. All right. The last one that I wanted to highlight is number 76. Men are born soft and supple. Dead, they are stiff and hard. Plants are born tender and pliant. Dead, they are brittle and dry. Thus, whoever is stiff and inflexible is a disciple of death. Whoever is soft and yielding is a disciple of life. The hard and stiff will be broken. The soft and supple will prevail.
I love that so much. That's just a beautiful one, right? Is speaking of that ability to be flexible. I get primarily metaphorically, but not only. There's something great about that, especially in a culture where we value so much strength. You think of it physically, right? Strength physically, just big, strong muscle, move big weights. That's great. It's wonderful. But if it doesn't go hand in hand with some flexibility, you're like the stereotype of the bodybuilder who's like, yeah, you look yoked, but you can't scratch your back. We got a problem there, Yeah. And it's like, and so this idea about, that ultimately is about how life is, right? That ability to adapt is probably the greatest ability that we can have. That ability to, because you don't run reality, you respond to reality. Reality is happening outside of whether you want things a certain way or not. And so and in order to adapt, what do you need? Flexibility. You can't adapt if you have only one way to respond to something. It's going to work some of the time and it's not going to work a lot of the time. And so that ability to kind of flow with it is the same thing we're saying about conversation. You're going to tweak your language and your conversation and your energy depending on who's in front of you. A book cannot do that. Hence why the Tao that can be explained is not the eternal one. The eternal one is the adaptable one, is the flexible one, is the one that you get to.
One. It's the living word.
Precisely. The written one, there are some limitations there.
I was meditating on the nature of writing like a religious text, and understanding that words that are written down, especially like, a Bible or any of these words that are written down and as these articles of faith, they're dead. They're stiff. You can't make modifications. There's no one with the authority to modify the Bible. They can interpret it in a billion ways. So the interpretations can change. So I guess in that way it's modifiable, but ultimately, like anything that is really a faith that I want to be involved, it has to be alive. It has to be moving and flexible. Ideas have to be alive. They have to be if you're in accord with life, and you're not a disciple of death, then you move and you adapt and you adjust and you get feedback and you don't double down on your thing that you thought was right and say like, let me plant my heels and entrench myself here, even though I know I'm wrong because I'm too afraid to be wrong. You just, you're supple. You're not holding on to anything. You're just like that judoka we mentioned, just kind of dancing through all the moves and all the force. And that's, I think, a great idea of what I'm trying to learn from this. I'm trying to learn like, how do I be supple? How do I unclench that clenching thing in my heart? How do I let my jaw, instead of holding it tight and trying to grit my way to creating something that I think is favorable or I think will get me love from the world, which is some projection of the love that I got from the attention of my parents and coaches and other people. Like, let me try to soften a little bit and listen to what the world wants from me, and then respond to what the world is asking, what I want from myself, what I truly want. Let me just dance with it a little bit more.
Yeah, that's the way. There's a thing that I would experience when doing standing meditation, where you kind of go into this pose, sort of hugging the tree type of feeling, where when you do that, you think you're relaxed, and suddenly you realize 10 minutes in, everything is burning. And you're like, why? And then you go, oh, I was holding way too much tension. Like, I can hold the same frame with half the energy, right? And I'm like, oh, so that's what I do probably in 10,000 situations in daily life, both physically and in other ways, and more metaphorically. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it's fascinating because even in situations where you think you're, no, I'm being relaxed, it's cool. It's like sometimes taking a third look, you get to see, okay, you can do the same thing as you say, unclench a little more, the jaw. Let it flow a little more. You don't have to hold on so tight. Very hard lesson for people who are wired the way you're wired or the way I'm wired. Because I'm used to getting shit done because I put my willpower in it. It's like, it's going to be this Conan the Barbarian Titanic effort of the will, and I'm going to make it happen and triumph and claim the prize. And then you realize, way too much yang.
Yeah, you do it like The Rock did in Hobbs and Shaw, where he had a chain around a helicopter, and with one hand he grabbed the chain and he drove the helicopter into the ground, which was one of my favorite scenes. Like, what? What did you just show? That's not real.
Don't tell me that.
You can't slam a helicopter into the ground with your brute strength.
I want to believe it.
Oh man. Well, I think that's why both of us are attracted to this, ancient wisdom. And we both know it's true. And we both have our challenges in living it and living the way. And we'll find our harmony with what our natural nature is. And I think that harmony will change as we get less force available to us. We'll use less force, but if we can get ahead of it a little bit, we'll burn ourselves out a little bit slower.
Which is as much as you can ask of anybody, right? Course correct a little. That's a win.
Yeah. Amen. Daniele, what are some of your favorite shows on History on Fire, and where can people find it?
So, Ikkyu Sojun. I did 2 episodes about Ikkyu's life, 40 something. So there's a couple. So History on Fire, you can find it a couple of different ways. If you want all of the episodes, they're out on Luminary. That's behind a paywall. Granted, it's a small paywall. I think it's like $5 a month or something like that. But that's kind of where everything is. They have also been nice enough to leave a lot of episodes, like 50 or so, outside of a paywall. So you can find it on like Apple Podcast or other things. So which I was happy that they chose that, because I don't like the idea of people paying for something when they don't know what they are getting. So I'm like, if you listen to a bunch of episodes that you like them, probably it's not going to kill you to throw in $5 a month to listen to more. But if you just want to test it out or listen to a few here and there, Apple Podcasts, check out a few and see if it's something that hit the spot for you. But yeah, the ones about Ikkyu, I had a blast. They just released a couple of free ones about Bruce Lee. That was cool. I had a great time with those. I did a bunch about Lakota culture. There's, historically speaking, that's probably the one thing that there are many topics I enjoy, but rarely I get to enjoy something as much as Lakota history. So I did a whole series on Crazy Horse, another one about Sitting Bull, another one about the War for the Black Hills leading to the Battle of the Little Bighorn. I just come alive when I chat about that stuff. So, but generally speaking, since they are all topics that I pick because I think there's something that kind of turns me on when I do the research, where I'm like, man, this is lighting stuff up inside me. I'm excited to learn more about it. Is usually stuff I like. In some cases, like the Ikkyu stuff, I like it even more than others.
Beautiful. Well, I know people will check it out. Daniele, my brother, was an honor.
Thank you
Thanks
so much
coming
for
in.
having
It's
me.
been great to hang. We'll let people know how the kendo goes. Peace, everybody. Much love. Bye. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.